Marcus Jackson stands frozen in the first-class aisle, boarding pass crumpled in his fist, as the flight attendant points him toward economy. "Sir, there must be a mistake," she insists, voice dripping with forced politeness. Behind him, a white businessman slides comfortably into Marcus's assigned seat with a satisfied smile. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling, this story will resonate with you. Hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on powerful stories of justice and resilience. Now let's see how this outrageous situation unfolds. The crisp Atlanta morning held promise as Marcus Johnson strode through Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. At 45 years old, the CEO of Innovate Tech carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had overcome countless obstacles to build a tech empire valued at over $400 million. Today's transcontinental flight to San Francisco would put him face-to-face with investors whose funding could revolutionize his company's newest artificial intelligence platform. Marcus adjusted his tailored navy suit and checked his Rolex, a gift from his board after securing their last major client. He had allowed himself precisely enough time to reach his gate without rushing. Efficiency was his trademark, both in business and personal life. "Good morning," he greeted the gate agent with a warm smile, presenting his first-class boarding pass and ID. The agent barely glanced at his documentation before waving him through with a perfunctory nod. As one of the first passengers to board, Marcus located his seat, 3A, a window position in the first row of first class. He stowed his briefcase containing his presentation materials in the overhead compartment and settled into the spacious leather seat. Years of building his company from nothing had earned him these small luxuries, though he never took them for granted. The cabin gradually filled with other passengers. A young white couple took the seats across the aisle, nodding politely to Marcus before becoming absorbed in their own conversation. He opened his tablet to review his presentation one final time before takeoff. "Excuse me, sir?" Marcus looked up to see flight attendant Brenda Wilson standing over him, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Though slightly puzzled, he had already presented it at the gate. Marcus pulled up the digital version on his phone and displayed it to her. "Is there a problem?" he asked. Brenda frowned, her forehead creasing as she examined the screen. "You're in first class," she stated, the inflection making it sound almost like a question. "Yes, I am." Marcus kept his voice even, though an all too familiar tension began building in his shoulders. "Just one moment, please." She walked away without further explanation. Marcus noticed several other passengers watching the interaction. The couple across the aisle exchanged glances. He returned to his tablet, determined not to let the interruption affect him, though the rhythm of his preparation was already broken. Minutes later, Brenda returned with another flight attendant, Trevor Parker, a tall man with sandy hair and a practiced customer service smile. "Sir, we're experiencing some confusion with the seating arrangements," Trevor explained. "The flight is overbooked and we need to verify everyone's assignments." "I've shown my boarding pass," Marcus replied calmly. "Seat 3A is mine." The boarding process continued around them, passengers filing past toward the economy section. A few glanced curiously at the discussion occurring in first class. "Mr. Johnson, if I could just see your ID again," Trevor insisted, despite the fact that Marcus had already been verified at the gate. With practiced patience born from similar encounters throughout his life, Marcus provided his driver's license. Trevor examined it longer than necessary before handing it back without comment. The tension might have dissipated there, but fate had other plans. A commotion at the front of the plane drew everyone's attention as Richard Hamilton, a white businessman in his 50s, boarded late, his face flushed with the entitlement of someone unaccustomed to waiting. "I'm so sorry I'm delayed," he announced, to no one in particular as he made his way down the aisle. Traffic was murder. Trevor immediately shifted his attention to the newcomer. "Mr. Hamilton, welcome aboard. We were just sorting out a seating issue." Hamilton glanced at Marcus with barely concealed disdain before addressing the flight attendant. "I should be in 3A. I have priority status." Without hesitation, Trevor turned to Marcus. "Sir, it appears there's been a mix-up. Mr. Hamilton has priority seating." "That's not possible," Marcus said, maintaining his composure while showing his boarding pass again. "My reservation was confirmed weeks ago. Seat 3A is assigned to me." Hamilton scoffed. "Look, I'm Diamond Medallion status. I always get first row when available." "Status doesn't override assigned seating," Marcus pointed out reasonably. "My boarding pass clearly shows 3A." Rather than checking Hamilton's documentation with the same scrutiny, Trevor simply nodded at the white businessman's words. "Sir," he said to Marcus, "we can find you a comfortable seat in economy. The flight is full, and we need to resolve this quickly for on-time departure." Marcus felt a familiar heat rising in his chest, the same sensation he'd experienced countless times when his credentials, achievements, and basic humanity were questioned because of his skin color. "I'm not giving up my assigned seat. Please check Mr. Hamilton's boarding pass." Trevor's friendly demeanor cooled noticeably. "Sir, I'll need to get my supervisor if you're going to be difficult about this." "Please do," Marcus replied, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline now coursing through his system. As Trevor walked away, Hamilton remained standing in the aisle, checking his watch ostentatiously and sighing loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. The young couple across the aisle now watched openly, discomfort evident on their faces. Allison Davis, the crew supervisor, arrived promptly. Her expression was already set in what Marcus recognized as conflict resolution mode. "What seems to be the problem here?" she asked, though her body language, turned toward Hamilton rather than Marcus, suggested she had already decided who deserved her attention. Marcus explained the situation once more, displaying his boarding pass and ID yet again. "I've been assigned seat 3A. I boarded on time. My documentation is in order." Allison barely glanced at his evidence before turning to Hamilton. "And you believe this is your seat, sir?" "I know it is," Hamilton stated confidently, finally producing his own boarding pass. "I always get front row with my status." Marcus caught a glimpse of Hamilton's boarding pass, enough to see that it showed seat 3C, not 3A. "His pass says 3C, Marcus pointed out. "That's across the aisle." Allison examined Hamilton's documentation briefly. "Mr. Hamilton is correct that Diamond members receive priority seating." "Priority doesn't mean taking someone else's assigned seat," Marcus countered, his patience wearing thin. "His boarding pass clearly shows 3C." By now, other first-class passengers were shifting uncomfortably, and the boarding process for economy had slowed as people noticed the confrontation. Marcus was acutely aware of becoming a spectacle, something he had worked his entire career to avoid. "Sir," Allison addressed Marcus with thinly veiled frustration, "we need to resolve this situation quickly. We can offer you a seat in economy for this flight and perhaps a voucher for the inconvenience." The implication was clear. Marcus was the problem that needed to be removed, not the white passenger trying to claim a seat that wasn't his. "This is unacceptable," Marcus said, his voice finally betraying a hint of the anger and humiliation building inside him. He pulled out his phone and began recording the interaction. "Sir, you need to put that away," Trevor quickly interjected. "Recording is against company policy." "Actually, it's not," Marcus replied, having researched passenger rights extensively after a previous incident. "Federal regulations allow passengers to record as long as it doesn't interfere with crew member duties." Allison's expression hardened. "Sir, if you cannot cooperate, we may need to ask you to leave the aircraft." The threat hung in the air. Marcus knew what it meant. As a black man, any escalation would likely end with security being called, potential allegations of being disruptive, and the very real possibility of being barred from the flight altogether. The investor meeting in San Francisco wasn't just important, it was potentially company-saving. He couldn't miss it. With every fiber of his being resisting, Marcus stopped recording and stood, gathering his briefcase from the overhead compartment. The weight of dozens of eyes on him felt physically oppressive as he moved toward the economy section. "Thank you for your cooperation," Allison said, her voice falsely bright. "Trevor will help you find your new seat." As Marcus followed Trevor toward economy, he glanced back to see Hamilton settling comfortably into seat 3A, his seat, with a satisfied expression that spoke volumes. The humiliation burned deeper than Marcus would ever admit aloud. "We have, a middle seat in row 27, Trevor informed him with what sounded like forced sympathy. "It's the best we can do on such a full flight." Marcus said nothing as he squeezed into the cramped middle seat between a large man already spilling into his space and a woman who sighed dramatically at having to momentarily stand to let him in. The contrast between the spacious first class accommodation he had paid for and this confined space was stark, just like the contrast between the treatment of Hamilton and himself. As the safety demonstration began, Marcus closed his eyes, trying to center himself for the meeting ahead. But inside, a resolve was forming. This time would be different. This time, he wouldn't let it go. The San Francisco morning greeted Marcus with characteristic fog and a chill that seemed to seep into his bones as he exited the airport terminal. The transcontinental flight had been a study in discomfort, 5 hours wedged between strangers, unable to work and mentally replaying the humiliation of being removed from his rightful seat. His neck ached from the awkward position he'd been forced to maintain, and exhaustion pulled at him from lack of proper rest. Marcus checked his watch. 3 hours until the meeting with Apex Ventures. Just enough time to reach his hotel, shower, change into a fresh suit, and review his presentation one final time. The stakes couldn't be higher. Innovate Tech needed this $50 million investment to launch their revolutionary AI platform before competitors could catch up. Marcus Johnson? A uniformed driver held a sign with his name. At least something was going according to plan. The company car. Service had remembered to pick him up. "That's me," Marcus confirmed, following the driver to a waiting black Suburban. Once settled in the back seat, Marcus pulled out his phone and saw 6 missed calls from Aisha Robinson, his COO and right hand since founding Innovate Tech 8 years ago. He dialed her immediately. Finally, Aisha answered on the first ring. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. Flight okay?" Marcus hesitated, unsure whether to burden her with what had happened. "It was delayed," he said finally. "I'm heading to the hotel now. How's everything on your end?" "All systems go. The team worked through the night to finalize the demo. It's flawless, Marcus. Apex will be blown away." "Good. That's good." His voice sounded distant even to his own ears. A pause. "Marcus, are you all right? You sound off." "Just tired. I'll see you at the Apex offices." After ending the call, Marcus leaned his head against the cool window glass, watching the San Francisco streets blur past. The memory of standing in that airplane aisle, being dismissed and devalued, replayed in his mind on an endless loop. It wasn't the first time he'd experienced such treatment, but something about this incident cut deeper, perhaps because of how far he'd come, or perhaps because he was simply tired of swallowing these indignities year after year. At the hotel, he moved mechanically through his preparations. Shower, shave, fresh suit, tie perfect, shoes gleaming. Each action a ritual he had performed countless times as armor before entering predominantly white business spaces. By the time he met Aisha in the lobby, he had reconstructed his CEO persona, confident, competent, unflappable. "You clean up nice for someone who just spent 5 hours on a plane," Aisha remarked, her keen eyes studying him. At 42, she matched his intensity and drive, which had made them an unstoppable team. "Let's focus," Marcus replied, avoiding her scrutiny. "Walk me through who's attending." As their taxi navigated toward the financial district, Aisha briefed him on the key players from Apex Ventures who would be evaluating their proposal. "Gregory Walsh is leading the investment committee. He's traditional but fair. Then there's..." Marcus tried to absorb the information, but his mind kept drifting back to the plane. The flight attendant's dismissive tone, Hamilton's entitlement, the eyes of other passengers watching his humiliation. "Marcus?" Aisha's voice snapped him back to the present. "Sorry, go on." She frowned. "I was asking if you wanted to lead with the market projection slides or the tech demonstration." "Tech demo," he answered quickly. "Let's show them what sets us apart, right from the start." The gleaming Apex Ventures building towered above them as they arrived. glass and steel reaching toward the sky, much like the aspirations Marcus had for Innovate Tech. The receptionist directed them to the 14th floor, conference room where the investment committee awaited. As they entered, 5 people rose to greet them. Marcus recognized Gregory Walsh immediately, a silver-haired venture capitalist with a reputation for funding companies that transformed industries. What he hadn't expected was the flash of recognition in Walsh's eyes. "Mr. Johnson, Ms. Robinson, welcome," Walsh said, extending his hand. "Glad you could make it despite the difficulties this morning." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Walsh had been on the flight, had witnessed his removal from first class. The humiliation he'd carefully packed away threatened to resurface. "Traffic in San Francisco is always a challenge," Marcus replied smoothly, refusing to acknowledge the implied reference to the airplane incident. The meeting began with introductions around the table, followed by Aisha's overview of Innovate Tech's growth trajectory. Marcus watched the investors' expressions, noting their engagement, looking for signs of the skepticism he'd grown accustomed to seeing when pitching to predominantly white venture capital firms. When his turn came to present the technical innovation at the heart of their proposal, Marcus stood and moved to the front of the room. He had given this presentation, or versions of it, dozens of times. The words should have flowed effortlessly. Instead, as he began speaking, an unbidden memory flashed through his mind. His first job interview after graduating with honors from MIT. The interviewer's surprise when Marcus walked in. The subtle shift in questions, more challenging than those posed to white candidates. The eventual rejection with no explanation. Marcus faltered mid-sentence. The conference room seemed to recede momentarily as past and present collided. "Mr. Johnson," one of the committee members prompted after the silence stretched uncomfortably. Aisha shot him a concerned glance. "Forgive me," Marcus said, regaining his composure. "As I was saying, our neural network architecture represents a fundamental shift in how AI systems process natural language." He continued the presentation, fighting to stay present, to focus on the potential investors rather than the ghosts of discrimination past and present that seemed determined to haunt him today. But each time he made eye contact with Walsh, he wondered what assumptions the man had made while watching the incident on the plane. During the technical demonstration, another memory intruded. A security guard following him through an electronics store where he'd been considering purchasing equipment for his first office. The unspoken assumption that he didn't belong, couldn't afford the high-end items, might be planning to steal something. "The implementation timeline seems ambitious," Walsh commented, bringing Marcus back to the present once more. "Especially for a company your size. We've consistently delivered ahead of industry standards," Marcus responded, sensing the subtle challenge in Walsh's tone. "Our team has already completed the foundational architecture." As the meeting progressed, Marcus felt increasingly that he wasn't being heard, that his expertise was being questioned in ways his white counterparts rarely experienced. Whether this was a continuation of the morning's discrimination or simply the normal skepticism of cautious investors, the effect was the same, an uphill battle to prove his worth. By the time they reached the financial projections, Marcus could tell they were losing the room. The energy had shifted. Questions became more pointed, focusing on potential weaknesses rather than strengths. "We've seen similar promises from AI startups before," one committee member remarked. "What makes Innovate Tech different?" It was a fair question, one Marcus would typically answer with confidence and precision. Instead, he heard himself providing a response that felt defensive, reactive rather than visionary. When Walsh checked his watch for the third time, Marcus knew the meeting wasn't going as planned. The final blow came with Walsh's concluding remarks. "Thank you for the comprehensive presentation. We'll need to review the materials more thoroughly before making any decisions. We'll be in touch next week." Next week. Not the commitment they had hoped for, not the enthusiasm other startups had reported after similar presentations to Apex. As they gathered their materials, Walsh approached Marcus privately. "Unfortunate business this morning on the flight," he said in a low voice. "These things happen. These things happen." As if racial discrimination were a minor inconvenience like a delayed flight or lost luggage, Marcus managed a tight nod, unwilling to discuss the incident in this setting. Outside the building, Aisha waited until they were alone before confronting him. "What happened in there? I've never seen you lose focus in a presentation." Marcus stared at the busy street, watching people rush past, each absorbed in their own concerns. "Nothing, just an off day." "Bullshit," Aisha said bluntly. "I've known you too long. Something happened." The weight of the day, of years of similar days, suddenly felt unbearable. "It was the flight," he admitted finally. "There was an incident." In the quiet corner of a nearby cafe, Marcus recounted the morning's events, his voice steady but his hands tightly gripping his coffee cup. Aisha listened without interruption, her expression shifting from concern to outrage. "And you just let them move you?" she asked when he finished. "What choice did I have? Make a scene? Get removed from the flight? Miss this meeting?" "The meeting that went sideways anyway," Aisha pointed out. Marcus rubbed his temples. "Walsh was on the flight, saw the whole thing." "Jesus," Aisha breathed. "No wonder he was looking at you like that. He probably thinks I did something to deserve it. That's always the assumption." Aisha leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Show me the video." "What?" "You said you started recording. Show me." Marcus reluctantly pulled out his phone and found the brief video he'd captured before being forced to stop. The footage wasn't long, but it clearly showed Hamilton being given preferential treatment and Allison threatening to remove Marcus from the flight. "This is textbook discrimination," Aisha said after watching it twice. "You can't let this slide. Not again." "What do you mean, not again?" "The conference in Dallas last year. The hotel in Chicago that lost your reservation. The restaurant in Boston that seated everyone but us. Every time you brush it off and move on because we have bigger battles. Maybe this is the battle, Marcus." Her words struck a chord. Each incident alone seemed manageable, forgivable, but collectively they formed a pattern of constant, grinding discrimination that wore away at his dignity, his mental health, his very sense of belonging in spaces he had earned the right to occupy. "What about the company?" he asked. "We need that investment." "We'll find other investors," Aisha said with conviction. "But right now this matters too. Not just for you, but for every black executive who boards a plane, checks into a hotel, or walks into a venture capital meeting." Marcus stared at the video on his phone, seeing himself, a successful CEO, a man who had overcome countless obstacles to build something meaningful, being treated as if he didn't belong. "You're right," he said finally. "Not this time. This time they answer for it." As they left the cafe, his phone buzzed with an email. The subject line read, "Apex Ventures, decision delay." The investment committee was postponing their decision indefinitely, citing concerns about InnovateTech's corporate focus and leadership stability. Marcus showed the email to Aisha, who read it with growing indignation. "They're using what happened on the plane against you," she concluded, "as if being discriminated against makes you less capable as a CEO." In that moment, as the San Francisco fog rolled in and obscured the tops of the city's tallest buildings, Marcus made a decision. This wouldn't just be about getting justice for himself. It would be about challenging a system that allowed such discrimination to continue unchecked, that penalized the victims rather than the perpetrators. "Call Maya," he told Aisha, referring to their company's legal counsel. "We're going to need her." The battle ahead would test everything Marcus had built, his company, his reputation, his resolve. But for the first time since that morning's humiliation, he felt a sense of purpose cutting through the fog of anger and helplessness. This time would be different. This time, he would fight back. The glass-walled conference room at InnovateTech's Atlanta headquarters hummed with tension as Marcus stared at the airline's email response displayed on the screen. The company's legal counsel, Maya Chen, removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. 20,000 sky miles and a voucher for future travel, she read aloud, her voice tinged with disbelief. That's their idea of appropriate compensation for clear discrimination. Marcus turned away from the screen, gazing out at the Atlanta. Skyline that had witnessed his rise from struggling entrepreneur to CEO of a company employing over 200 people. The city had shaped him, challenged him, and now seemed to be asking, "What will you do this time?" "It's more than they usually offer," he said quietly, testing the words even as they felt hollow in his mouth. "Maybe we should just accept it and focus on finding new investors since Apex is dragging their feet." Aisha, who had been uncharacteristically silent until now, slammed her hand on the conference table. "Are you serious right now? After everything you've built, everything you've overcome, you're going to let them buy you off with frequent flyer miles?" Her words hung in the air, a direct challenge to the rationalization Marcus was attempting to construct. The same one he had built after countless similar incidents throughout his life and career. "It's not that simple," he replied, turning back to face her. "Every time I've spoken up about discrimination, it's been twisted and used against me. Remember Westridge Partners?" The reference needed no elaboration. 3 years earlier, after pointing out discriminatory funding patterns at a major investment firm, Marcus had found himself labeled as difficult in industry circles. Several potential partnerships had mysteriously evaporated afterward. "So we just accept it? Again?" Aisha pressed. "What message does that send to your children? To our employees who look up to you?" Maya interrupted before Marcus could respond. "There's another angle to consider. This isn't just about the airline's response to you personally. What about their pattern of behavior?" She tapped on her tablet, bringing up a social media post on the conference room screen. It showed a blurry video taken by another passenger on the same flight, capturing part of the incident. The caption read, "Watched a black man in a suit get kicked out of his paid first-class seat today for a white businessman who arrived late. Flying while black." "This was posted yesterday," Maya explained. "It's already gained significant traction online. Several journalists have reached out to the original poster for details." Marcus hadn't considered that other passengers might have documented the incident. The realization that his humiliation had been witnessed and shared publicly sent a complex wave of emotions through him, embarrassment mixed with vindication that others had recognized the injustice. "The public narrative is forming with or without your input," Maya continued pragmatically. "The question is whether you want to shape it or let others define what happened." The conference room door opened as Dr. William Carter, the eldest member of Innovate Tech's board and Marcus's longtime mentor, entered. At 74, Dr. Carter carried himself with the dignified bearing of someone who had marched alongside civil rights leaders in his youth and gone on to become one of the first black professors at a prestigious Southern university. "I heard about what happened," he said without preamble, taking a seat at the table. "Aisha filled me in." Marcus felt a flicker of annoyance at Aisha for involving Dr. Carter, but it quickly faded under his mentor's steady gaze. "What do you think I should do?" Marcus asked, respect evident in his tone. Dr. Carter took his time responding, his weathered hands folded thoughtfully on the table. "During the civil rights movement, we had a saying, 'Not for ourselves alone.' It meant that our individual battles were part of a larger struggle for justice that would benefit generations to come." He looked directly at Marcus. "The question isn't what you should do for yourself. It's what your position and resources allow you to do for others facing the same discrimination without your platform." The room fell silent as the weight of Dr. Carter's words settled over them. For Marcus, it triggered memories long suppressed. His father being passed over for promotions despite outstanding performance reviews. His mother's quiet dignity in the face of store clerks who followed her through aisles. His own experiences as the only black student in advanced placement classes. His phone vibrated with an incoming call, breaking the moment. It was Tanya, his wife of 15 years, and a respected civil rights attorney in her own right. He excused himself to take the call in the hallway. "I just saw a video online," Tanya said immediately. "Is that what happened on your flight?" Marcus sighed, leaning against the wall. "It's not the full story, but yes. Why didn't you tell me? I was trying not to bring it home, again." The silence on the line spoke volumes. Tanya had witnessed Countless moments when Marcus had chosen to shield their family from the racism he encountered, absorbing the pain rather than spreading it to those he loved. "Marcus," she said finally, her voice gentle but firm. "Zoe showed me the video. Their 16-year-old daughter had seen it." The thought made his stomach clench. "She's upset," Tanya continued, "not just about what happened to you, but because she's seen the same thing happen to her friend's parents. She wants to know what you're going to do about it." What was he going to do about it? The question echoed through his mind, taking on new significance with the knowledge that his children were watching, learning from his response. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "The company needs that investment from Apex. Fighting the airline could create more negative attention." "Would you let Zoe or Malcolm walk away if they were discriminated against?" Tanya challenged, referring to their teenage son. "Or would you tell them to stand up for themselves?" The answer was immediate and unequivocal. "I'd tell them to stand up." "Then why are the rules different for you?" When Marcus returned to the conference room, his demeanor had shifted. The others noticed immediately, straightening in their chairs as he took his position at the head of the table. "Maya," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "what are our options?" Maya didn't hesitate. "We have several. First, a formal complaint to the Department of Transportation regarding discriminatory treatment. Second, legal action against the airline for violation of your civil rights. Third, using media channels to bring attention to the issue and force a more appropriate response." "What about direct engagement with airline leadership?" Marcus asked. "Before going public or legal?" "We could draft a detailed account and send it directly to Thomas Wilson, their CEO," Maya confirmed. "Request specific actions rather than compensation. Policy changes, staff training, disciplinary action for those involved." Marcus nodded slowly. "Draft the letter. Include everything: the video, witness statements if possible, documentation of their inadequate response. Make it clear that we're prepared to escalate if necessary." "And Apex Ventures?" Aisha asked. "We proceed as planned," Marcus decided. "If they're judging our company based on my experience of discrimination rather than our business model and technology, they're not the partners we want anyway. Reach out to the other investment groups on our list." Dr. Carter nodded approvingly. "Strategic pressure rather than public confrontation. It gives them a chance to do the right thing before facing consequences." "Exactly," Marcus agreed. "But if they don't respond appropriately," he left the implication hanging. The meeting continued as they developed their approach, considering contingencies and potential repercussions. When they finally adjourned 2 hours later, Marcus felt a clarity that had eluded him since the incident. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. Not just for himself, but for every person who had ever been made to feel they didn't belong in spaces they had earned the right to occupy. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wondered if you should speak up? If you've been in Marcus's position or seen someone else treated unfairly, comment 1 if you think he should fight this battle publicly, or 2 if you believe he should handle it privately to protect his company. Hit that like button if you're rooting for Marcus to stand up against this injustice, and subscribe to see how this confrontation unfolds. What would you do if you were in Marcus's position? Accept the airline's offer and focus on your business, or take a stand regardless of the potential consequences? That evening, Marcus arrived home later than usual. The lights in the kitchen illuminated Tanya at the island counter, case files spread before her, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up as he entered, her expression questioning. "I'm going to fight it," he said simply. Tanya nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "I knew you would." "Did you?" "Because I wasn't sure." She closed the file she'd been reviewing and removed her glasses. "You've always fought the important battles, Marcus. You just needed to recognize that this is one of them." From the doorway, a voice interrupted. "So you're really going after them?" Their daughter Zoe stood there in sweatpants and an MIT hoodie, her declaration of future intentions, her expression a mixture of concern and pride. "I am," Marcus confirmed. "The airline, at least. We're starting with a formal complaint to the CEO." Zoe entered the kitchen fully, followed by her younger brother, Malcolm, who had apparently been listening from around the corner. "The video's all over TikTok," Malcolm informed them, his 14-year-old face serious beyond his years. "Some of my friends recognized you." Marcus hadn't considered how the incident might affect his children at school. "Has anyone said anything to you about it?" Malcolm and Zoe exchanged glances before Zoe answered. "Jason Whitfield said his dad told him you probably did something to deserve it." The casual cruelty of the comment and the assumption of guilt that black people carried like an invisible burden hit Marcus hard. "And what did you say?" "I told him his dad was a racist and to stay out of my face," Zoe replied with a defiant lift of her chin. "Zoe," Tanya admonished, though without much conviction. "What?" "It's true. Mr. Whitfield crossed the street last month when Dad was jogging in the neighborhood. Malcolm and I both saw him." Marcus pulled out a stool and sat heavily, the weight of the day, of years, pressing down on him. "This is exactly why I've tried to handle these incidents quietly. I didn't want them touching you." "Dad," Malcolm said with the directness of youth, "they already touch us. Last week, a security guard followed me and Jamal around the mall. Not the white kids we were meeting, just us. And my economics teacher still seems surprised every time I get an A on a test," Zoe added. "Like she's waiting for me to fail, so her worldview makes sense again." Marcus and Tanya exchanged pained glances. Despite their success, their children weren't shielded from the reality of growing up black in America. Perhaps, Marcus reflected, his attempts to protect them by absorbing these indignities silently had denied them the opportunity to see models of resistance. "So what's the plan?" Malcolm asked, hopping onto a counterstool. "Are you going to sue them? Make them apologize on TV?" Despite the heaviness of the conversation, Marcus smiled at his son's enthusiasm. "We're starting with a formal complaint to the airline CEO. Depending on their response, we'll decide next steps." "What if they ignore you?" Zoe questioned, always, the strategist of the family. "Then we escalate," Marcus replied simply. "But we're giving them a chance to do the right thing first." As the family discussion continued over dinner, Marcus felt a subtle shift in his perspective. What had begun as his personal humiliation was transforming into a family commitment to justice, a teachable moment about standing up against discrimination rather than accepting it as the cost of success in America. Later that night, as Marcus and Tanya prepared for bed, she handed him a business card. "Catherine Reynolds," she explained, investigative journalist with the Tribune. "She specializes in corporate accountability stories. If the airline stonewalls you, she might be interested." Marcus took the card, turning it over thoughtfully. "Let's hope we don't need her." "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst," Tanya replied, a mantra that had guided their approach to navigating predominantly white spaces throughout their careers. The next morning, Maya delivered the draft letter to the airline CEO for Marcus's review. The document was comprehensive, detailing the incident with clinical precision, including links to the videos captured by Marcus and other passengers. It requested specific remedies, disciplinary action for the crew members involved, revised training protocols, and a formal apology. Most importantly, it outlined a clear timeline for response before further action would be taken. "It's perfect," Marcus told Maya after reviewing it. "Send it directly to Wilson with delivery confirmation." As Maya left to finalize the letter, Aisha entered Marcus's office with news. "Apex Ventures just officially passed on our proposal," she reported without preamble. "Their official reason is concerns about market fit, but my contact there says it's more complicated. Apparently Hamilton is a golf buddy of Gregory Walsh." "Hamilton? The passenger from the flight?" Marcus asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Aisha nodded grimly. "Small world, isn't it? He's some big shot in commercial real estate. Has investments in several companies Apex has funded." The revelation landed like a physical blow. Not only had Hamilton stolen Marcus's seat, but his connections had potentially cost Innovate Tech a crucial investment opportunity. The injustice of it burned anew. "So we lost $50 million because I wouldn't give up my seat to a white man," Marcus said, the words bitter on his tongue. "Maybe," Aisha conceded. "Or maybe we dodged a bullet." Do we really want investors who make decisions based on country club connections rather than the merit of our technology? She had a point, but it didn't ease the sting of the setback. Innovate Tech needed that capital infusion to stay ahead of competitors. Without it, they might have to delay their product launch, potentially losing their market advantage. "What about our other prospects?" Marcus asked. "I've scheduled meetings with 3 other venture capital firms next week," Aisha reported. "None as large as Apex, but collectively they could meet our funding needs." Marcus nodded, mentally adjusting. Their timeline. "And our current runway?" 6 months before we need to start making cuts, Aisha replied. 8 if we delay the marketing push. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. They had overcome worse obstacles in building Innovate Tech from the ground up. "We'll make it work," Marcus decided. "In the meantime, we focus on getting justice. From the airline. One battle at a time." What neither of them realized was that the battle was about to expand beyond their control. By that afternoon, the video of Marcus's removal from first class had gone viral, picked up by national news outlets and social media influencers. Your first class while black was trending, with thousands sharing similar experiences of discrimination while traveling. Marcus's phone began ringing non-stop, journalists seeking comments, civil rights organizations offering support, and colleagues expressing solidarity. The private stand he had intended to take had become a public cause célèbre almost overnight. As Marcus watched the story unfold across multiple screens in Innovate Tech's media room, he felt a complex mixture of vindication and apprehension. The public attention validated his experience, but also created new pressures and potential pitfalls. Every word he said now would be scrutinized, every action interpreted through the lens of this growing controversy. "What do we do?" he asked. Tanya, who had come to the office after seeing the news breaking. She considered for a moment, her legal mind assessing the shifting landscape. "We stay the course," she finally advised. "The letter to the CEO still makes sense. Let's see how they respond now that there's public pressure too." Later that day, an email arrived from the airline, not from CEO Thomas Wilson, as they had addressed their complaint, but from the corporate communications department. The message was brief and formulaic. "We take these allegations seriously and are conducting an internal review. We are committed to providing excellent service to all our passengers without discrimination." Maya read the email aloud in Marcus's office, her disappointment evident. "This is a standard PR response. They're not actually addressing anything in our letter. So they're stalling," Marcus concluded, frustration building, hoping the public attention will die down. "Probably," Maya agreed. "But they're miscalculating if they think this is going away easily. The story has resonated because it's so relatable to so many people." Marcus stared out his office window at the Atlanta streets below, remembering his father's words from years ago. "They'll let you in the building, son, but they'll always find ways to remind you that they think you don't belong there." At the time, Marcus had vowed to prove them wrong, to be so successful that no one could question his belonging. Now he realized the flaw in that thinking. No amount of success could protect him from the fundamental prejudice that saw his black skin. Before seeing his humanity, we give them 48 hours to provide a substantive response, he decided. Then we move to the next phase. The decision made, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. This fight wasn't just about one incident on one flight. It was about challenging a system that perpetuated discrimination in both obvious and subtle ways. It was about standing up not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever swallowed their dignity for the sake of getting through the day. As Dr. Carter had said, "Not for ourselves alone," the headline flashed across CNBC's ticker. Sky Global Airline stock dips 3% amid discrimination allegations. It had been 72 hours since Marcus's letter to CEO Thomas Wilson, and the airline's only response remained that initial corporate statement promising an internal review. Meanwhile, the court of public opinion was rendering its own verdict. Marcus watched the financial news from his office, a cup of coffee cooling on his desk. The airline's stock drop represented millions in lost market value, perhaps the only language that might finally get the attention of their leadership. His intercom buzzed. "Marcus, the board is assembled in the conference room. his assistant informed him. "I'll be right there," he replied, straightening his tie and gathering his thoughts. The impromptu board meeting had been called by Elizabeth Vaughn, Innovate Tech's lead investor and most influential board member. Her message had been cryptic, but urgent. "We need to discuss recent developments and their potential impact on company operations." Marcus knew what that meant. The growing controversy was making investors nervous. Despite the personal nature of the discrimination he'd experienced in the business world, it was inevitably viewed through the lens of risk and return. The question would be whether his pursuit of justice threatened their investment. The conference room fell silent as Marcus entered. 8 board members sat around the polished table, expressions ranging from concern to outright discomfort. Elizabeth Vaughn, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that matched her silver hair, nodded toward the empty chair at the head of the table. "Marcus, thank you for joining us on such short notice," she began once he was seated. "I believe you know why we've called this meeting." "I can guess," he replied evenly, maintaining eye contact. "The airline incident and its aftermath." Elizabeth nodded. "Several major news outlets have reached out to me personally for comment, as have 2 of our largest clients. The situation is beginning to affect Innovate Tech's public profile." "With respect," Marcus countered, "I'm pursuing this matter as a private citizen who experienced discrimination. I haven't used the company's name or resources in this fight." James Whitaker, the board's most conservative member, cleared his throat. "The distinction may be clear to you, Marcus, but not to the public or our clients. Like it or not, as CEO, your personal battles become company issues." Marcus had anticipated this argument. Should I simply accept discrimination then? Because addressing it might cause discomfort for our stakeholders? Dr. Carter, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. "I believe what James is suggesting isn't that you accept discrimination, but rather that we need a strategy for managing the company's position while you pursue your personal case." Elizabeth nodded. "Exactly. We support your right to fight this injustice, Marcus. The question is how to insulate Innovate Tech from potential blowback." It was a reasonable concern, though Marcus couldn't help feeling that it prioritized corporate reputation over the fundamental issue of racial justice. Still, these were his investors, people who had believed in his vision and funded its realization. He owed them candor. "My legal team is handling the airline matter," he explained. "We've given them a reasonable time frame to respond appropriately before taking further action. I've declined all media requests for interviews and made no public statements beyond confirming the basic facts of the incident." "And if they continue to stonewall you?" James pressed. "Then we'll pursue legal remedies and regulatory complaints," Marcus answered honestly. "But my focus remains on running this company. The AI platform launch is still our priority." The tension in the room eased slightly as board members exchanged glances. Elizabeth spoke for the group. "We appreciate your commitment, Marcus. Keep us informed of any significant developments. In the meantime, we'll have PR prepare contingency statements if media inquiries increase." As the meeting adjourned, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and frustration. The board hadn't explicitly asked him to drop his fight against the airline, but the subtext was clear. Don't let it interfere with business. Back in his office, Aisha was waiting with news of her own. "You need to see this," she said, sliding a tablet across his desk. The screen displayed an article from a business news site with the headline, "Sources claim Sky Global passenger was belligerent before removal from first class." Marcus read the piece with growing indignation. Anonymous airline sources claimed he had been argumentative and demanding special treatment, necessitating his relocation to economy. There was no mention of Richard Hamilton taking his assigned seat or the crew's failure to verify boarding passes properly. "They're trying to rewrite what happened," Marcus said, placing the tablet down carefully to avoid the urge to throw it. "Painting me as the stereotypical angry black man to justify their actions." "It gets worse," Aisha continued. "I did some digging on Richard Hamilton after learning about his connection to Apex Ventures. Turns out he's not just any real estate developer. His company Prestige Properties has a long-term contract providing office space for Sky Global's corporate headquarters in Atlanta." The revelation landed like a thunderbolt. So he has business, ties to the airline too, Marcus realized. That explains why the crew was so quick to accommodate him at my expense. Exactly. This isn't just about race, though that's clearly a factor. It's about connections and power. Hamilton is part of a network that includes both the airline leadership and our potential investors. Marcus processed this information, seeing the incident in a new light. What he had experienced wasn't just random discrimination, but something potentially more systemic, a manifestation of how business relationships and racial bias could intertwine to protect certain interests at the expense of others. Maya needs to know this, he decided. It changes our approach. Over the next few days, the corporate battle intensified. Sky Global Airlines released an official statement claiming their internal investigation found no evidence of discriminatory intent and characterizing the incident as a routine seating adjustment due to operational needs. They offered to upgrade Marcus on his next flight and provide additional Sky miles as a gesture of goodwill. The response was as insulting as it was inadequate. Marcus's legal team promptly rejected the offer and filed a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation, citing violation of federal regulations prohibiting discrimination by air carriers. Meanwhile, Aisha made a discovery that shifted the dynamics of their fight. Through industry contacts, she learned that Marcus wasn't the first black executive to experience discriminatory treatment from this particular Sky Global crew. 3 other incidents had occurred in the past year, all involving the same flight attendants and supervisor who had removed Marcus from his seat. They've done this before, Aisha reported, presenting Marcus with documentation from 2 executives, willing to share their experiences. Same pattern, questioning black passengers' presence in first class, checking their documentation multiple times, ultimately finding reasons to remove them when white passengers needed accommodation. This information transformed what might have been dismissed as an isolated incident into evidence of a pattern. Maya immediately incorporated the new testimonies into their case, strengthening their position substantially. The airline's response was swift and aggressive. Their legal department sent a cease and desist letter warning against defamatory statements that could damage the company's reputation. At the same time, Marcus began receiving troubling reports from Innovate Tech's sales team. 2 potential clients have pulled out of contract negotiations, his chief revenue officer reported during their weekly executive meeting. They cited concerns about leadership stability as the reason. Marcus recognized the language immediately, the same wording Apex Ventures had used in declining their investment. Hamilton and his network are applying pressure, he concluded, trying to make this fight too costly for us to continue. The strategy was effective. By the end of the week, Innovate Tech had lost a significant government contract that had been all but finalized. The official explanation cited procurement process revisions, but the timing was suspicious at best. The board called another emergency meeting. This time, the tone was markedly different, less supportive, more concerned about the company's financial stability. We've lost $8 million in projected revenue in a matter of days, James Whitaker stated bluntly. Our stock price has dipped 12%. At what point do we acknowledge that this battle is damaging Innovate Tech more than it's helping anyone? Elizabeth Vaughn, usually Marcus's strongest ally on the board, looked troubled. Marcus, I believe in fighting injustice, but I also believe in fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders and employees. We need to consider whether there's a way to resolve this situation quickly. Marcus felt the weight of 200 employees' livelihoods on his shoulders. The company he had built from nothing was now being systematically targeted because he had dared to stand up against discrimination. The irony was bitter. What exactly are you suggesting? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Accept their upgraded settlement offer, James said immediately. Sign the NDA they're proposing. Put this behind us and refocus on business. The airline had indeed made a new offer, $50,000 in compensation and lifetime elite status, in exchange for Marcus signing a non-disclosure agreement and dropping all complaints. It was substantially more than their initial offering, but still missed the fundamental point. This wasn't about money or perks. It was about accountability and systemic change. And if I refuse? Marcus questioned, looking around the table. Deflect, Carter sighed heavily. Then we may need to discuss leadership arrangements that protect both your ability to pursue this matter and the company's stability. The implication was clear. Step down as CEO, at least temporarily, or drop the fight. As Marcus left the board meeting with this ultimatum hanging over him, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I have information about Sky Global you need to see. Meet me at Piedmont Park, Northeast Entrance, 7 p.m. Come alone. TP. The initials registered immediately. Trevor Parker, the flight attendant who had been part of the crew that removed Marcus from his seat. What information could he possibly have that would warrant a clandestine meeting? Marcus debated whether to go. It could be a trap, an attempt to create a compromising situation that would further damage his credibility. But it could also be legitimate. Perhaps Parker had had a change of heart, or possessed evidence that could strengthen their case. After consulting with Tanya and Maya, Marcus decided to meet Parker, but with precautions. Tanya would wait nearby in their car, watching the meeting from a distance. Marcus would record the entire conversation on his phone. And he would meet in a public area of the park where other people would be present. As dusk fell over Atlanta, Marcus approached the northeast entrance of Piedmont Park. The evening joggers and dog walkers provided a sense of security as he scanned the area for Trevor Parker. He spotted the flight attendant sitting alone on a bench near the path, out of uniform and looking considerably more nervous than he had on the plane. Mr. Johnson, Parker acknowledged as Marcus approached. Thank you for coming. You said, you have information, Marcus replied, remaining standing. I'm listening. Parker glanced around before speaking in a low voice. What happened to you wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern encouraged by management. We already know about the other passengers who experienced similar treatment, Marcus said. It goes deeper than that, Parker insisted. Sky Global has unwritten policies about passenger prioritization. Crew members are trained to identify high-value travelers who should receive preferential treatment when flights are overbooked or other issues arise. And how is high value determined? Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer. Officially by frequent flyer status and fare class, Parker explained. Unofficially, it's about who looks the part, who fits the profile of a premium traveler, according to management's vision. Which doesn't include black passengers, Marcus concluded. Parker had the decency to look ashamed. Not typically, no. There's training on how to politely redirect passengers who don't match seat assignments. The examples used in training are almost always people of color, especially black travelers. Marcus felt a cold anger building. And you participated in this system. I did, Parker admitted. I'm not proud of it. But after seeing what happened to you and the company's response, lying about what occurred, painting you as the problem, I couldn't stay silent. Why come forward now? Because they're doing it again. The airline is building a case against you, pulling security footage from other flights you've taken, looking for any instance where you might have appeared even slightly agitated. They're planning to leak it to friendly media outlets to discredit you. The revelation wasn't entirely surprising, but the scale of the effort to undermine him was still shocking. Do you have proof of any of this? Documents, recordings, anything concrete? Parker hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a flash drive. Training materials, internal memos about passenger management, and emails about how to handle your specific case. I copied them before they could be deleted. As Marcus took the drive, Parker added, I'll probably lose my job over this, but what they're doing isn't right. It never was. Why did you participate in it then? Marcus couldn't help asking. Parker looked away. The same reason most people go along with broken systems. It was easier. It was my job. I didn't think about the real impact on people like you until I saw the fallout from our flight. It wasn't a satisfying answer, but it was an honest one. Most discrimination wasn't perpetrated by cackling villains twirling mustaches, but by ordinary people following policies and practices designed to maintain existing power structures without questioning who they hurt in the process. What happens now? Parker asked. I review what you've provided with my legal team, Marcus replied. If it substantiates what you've told me, it becomes evidence in our case against the airline. And me? That depends on whether you're willing to go on record with what you've shared today. Parker looked genuinely afraid at the prospect, but after a moment, he nodded. I can't keep being part of the problem. Whatever happens, I'll testify if needed. As Marcus walked back to where Tanya waited in their car, he felt the weight of the flash drive in his pocket. Potentially, the key to exposing not just one incident of discrimination, but an entire corporate culture built on biased assumptions and practices. The battle had escalated beyond what he had initially imagined, touching on his company's future, his professional reputation, and potentially the experiences of countless travelers who had faced similar treatment without the resources or platform to fight back. What had begun as one man's humiliation on a flight was revealing itself to be the tip of a much larger iceberg of systemic discrimination, one that powerful interests were determined to keep submerged, regardless of the cost. The midnight glow of Marcus's laptop illuminated his face as he scrolled through another batch of threatening messages. 3 weeks into his battle with Sky Global Airlines, the toll was mounting in ways he hadn't anticipated. His public email address had been leaked online, resulting in hundreds of messages ranging from supportive to explicitly racist and threatening. You should be grateful they even let you on the plane, one message read. Another, go back to where you came from, if you don't like how things work here. Then there were the more disturbing ones, threats against him and his family, some including personal details that suggested the senders had done their research. Maya had advised forwarding these to law enforcement, which he'd done, though without much expectation of action. A soft knock at his home office door interrupted his grim review. Tanya stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. It's 2 a.m, Marcus, she said gently. Come to bed. In a minute, he replied automatically, the same response he'd given hours earlier. Tanya entered the room fully, coming to stand behind him. Her sharp intake of breath told him she'd seen the messages on his screen. You shouldn't be reading these, she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Nothing good comes from absorbing so much hatred. I need to know what we're facing, Marcus argued weakly, though he knew she was right. The messages were affecting him, seeping into his psyche like poison, making him question whether the fight was worth the cost. Tanya reached over and closed the laptop firmly. No more tonight, doctor's orders. Despite everything, Marcus smiled slightly at the reference to her honorary title. The kids had started calling her Dr. Mom years ago because of her ability to diagnose and solve family problems with surgical precision. I lost another client. Today, he admitted as they walked toward their bedroom. Peterson Group, $800,000 in annual revenue. Tanya absorbed this information without visible reaction, though Marcus knew she understood the implications. Hamilton's network again? Almost certainly. Their CEO suddenly had concerns about alignment with our current strategic direction. In the 3 weeks since Trevor Parker had provided internal documents exposing Sky Global's discriminatory practices, the airline had escalated their counterattack. Rather than addressing the evidence directly, they had filed a lawsuit against Marcus for corporate espionage and defamation, claiming the documents were obtained illegally and contained proprietary information protected by trade secrets laws. Simultaneously, Richard Hamilton appeared to be leveraging his business connections to apply economic pressure on Innovate Tech. Key clients were mysteriously developing concerns about continuing their relationships. Potential investors were suddenly unavailable for meetings. Even the company's banking partners had initiated a routine review of their credit facilities. As Marcus and Tanya prepared for bed, a text message alert broke the silence. Marcus reached for his phone with a sense of dread, expecting more bad news from the company. Instead, it was from Aisha. Turn on CNN, now. Marcus grabbed the remote and switched on the bedroom television, finding the news channel. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, Breaking. Sky Global Airlines accused of systematic racial discrimination. Catherine Reynolds, the investigative journalist whose card Tanya had given Marcus weeks earlier, appeared on screen discussing documents that revealed a pattern of discriminatory practices at the airline. While she didn't name Trevor Parker as her source, the materials she referenced were clearly the same ones he had provided. According to internal training materials we've obtained, Reynolds was saying, flight attendants were specifically instructed to identify passengers who appear out of place in premium cabins and find ways to relocate them if necessary to accommodate priority customers. Marcus and Tanya watched in stunned silence as Reynolds methodically outlined the evidence, including emails from airline executives discussing how to handle the Johnson incident by discrediting Marcus rather than addressing the underlying issues. "This changes everything," Tanya said as the segment concluded with the anchor noting that Sky Global's stock had plummeted in after-hours trading following the report. "Or escalates everything," Marcus countered, already reaching for his phone. As it began ringing, it was Maya. "I assume you're watching the news," she said without preamble. "The airline's lawyers just called. They want to discuss settlement terms tomorrow morning." The sudden shift was telling. With their discriminatory practices now exposed publicly, Sky Global was scrambling to contain the damage. But Marcus wasn't naive enough to think their troubles were over. "Let's see what they offer," he told Maya. "But don't expect them to surrender easily." His prediction proved accurate. The next day's meeting with Sky Global's legal team revealed their strategy. A substantial financial settlement, now increased to $500,000, combined with a mutual non-disparagement agreement and no admission of wrongdoing. "My client isn't interested in money," Maya informed them coolly. "He wants accountability and systemic change." The airline's lead counsel, a sharp-featured woman named Patricia Winters, smiled thinly. "Admirable, but not practical. We have shareholders to consider." "And we have future passengers to consider," Maya countered. "People who deserve to be treated with dignity regardless of their race." The meeting ended in stalemate, but Marcus knew the public exposure had shifted the dynamics significantly. Sky Global was now facing not just his individual complaint, but public scrutiny of their entire corporate culture. As weeks passed, however, the personal cost of the battle continued to mount. Tanya received a call from her law firm's managing partner expressing concern about potential conflicts of interest, given her husband's high-profile case against a company with connections to several of the firm's clients. The message was clear. Her career advancement could be affected by Marcus's fight. At home, their children were experiencing the fallout as well. Malcolm came home from school one day with a black eye after defending himself against a classmate who had repeated racist comments about his father heard at home. "He said you were playing the race card to get special treatment," Malcolm explained as Tanya applied ice to his swollen face. "That his dad said people like us always want something for nothing." The casual cruelty of the comment and the knowledge that it reflected attitudes being discussed in other homes hit Marcus harder than any financial setback. His children were paying the price for his stand against injustice. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Marcus and Tanya had their first serious argument about whether to continue the fight. "Maybe we should consider their settlement offer," Marcus suggested, his resolve wavering in the face of his son's injury. "Use the money to fund a foundation addressing discrimination in travel. Make a difference that way instead." Tanya looked at him with surprise. "Is that what you really want? To let them buy their way out of accountability?" "I want our children not to be targets," Marcus replied, frustration bleeding into his voice. "I want your career not to suffer. I want to run my company without constantly fighting attacks from all sides." "So you're willing to let them win," Tanya said, disappointment evident. "This isn't about winning or losing anymore, Tanya. It's about survival. Innovate Tech is bleeding clients. The board is talking about replacing me if this continues. We've had to hire security because of death threats. At what point do we say enough?" Tanya was silent for a long moment, weighing his words. "I understand being tired, Marcus, I really do. But what message does giving up send to Malcolm and Zoe? That fighting injustice is only worth it when it's convenient, when there's no personal cost?" Before Marcus could respond, the doorbell rang. Unusual for nearly 10 o'clock at night. Through the security camera, they saw a police officer standing on their porch. Fear gripped Marcus as he went to answer. Had something happened to one of their family members? Had one of the threats against them escalated into action? The officer, a middle-aged white man with a solemn expression, introduced himself as Detective Williams. Mr. Johnson, I'm here about a complaint filed against you by Sky Global Airlines. They're alleging corporate espionage and theft of confidential documents. The accusation was absurd. Marcus had never personally accessed any of Sky Global's systems or stolen any documents. Trevor Parker had voluntarily provided the materials now being discussed in the media, but the message was clear. The airline was escalating from civil to criminal allegations in their attempt to silence him. After the detective left, having taken Marcus's statement denying any illegal activity, Tanya's legal training kicked into high gear. "This is intimidation, pure and simple," she declared, pacing their living room. "They're trying to scare you into taking their settlement." "It's working," Marcus admitted, his composure finally cracking. "I didn't sign up for police at our door, for Malcolm getting into fights, for your firm pressuring you. This isn't just about me anymore." "It never was just about you," Tanya reminded him gently. "That's why it matters so much." The next morning brought more challenges. Marcus arrived at Innovate Tech's offices to find Elizabeth Vaughn waiting in his office, her expression grave. "The board has called an emergency meeting for this afternoon," she informed him without preamble. "James is pushing for a vote on temporary leadership change while you address your personal matters." Despite Elizabeth's diplomatic phrasing, the message was unmistakable. Marcus was at risk of losing control of his own company because of his refusal to back down from the discrimination fight. "How likely is he to succeed?" Marcus asked, his voice remarkably steady given the stakes. "It's close," Elizabeth admitted. "The financial impacts are becoming difficult to ignore. We've lost 15% of our recurring revenue in a month. Our stock is down 22%. Investors are nervous." Marcus absorbed this information like physical blows. Everything he had built over 8 years of relentless work was in jeopardy because he had dared to stand up against being removed from a seat he had paid for due to the color of his skin. The injustice of it was breathtaking. "What would you do, Elizabeth?" he asked, genuinely curious about her perspective as both an investor and someone who had expressed personal support for his stand. She considered the question carefully before answering. "I'd remember why I started this company in the first place. Was it just to build wealth and status? Or was there a deeper purpose?" The question resonated deeply. Marcus had founded Innovate Tech, not just to create innovative technology, but to open doors for other people of color in an industry that had historically excluded them. The company's internship programs, community outreach, and inclusive hiring practices were as important to him as its products and profits. "If I surrender to this pressure," Marcus reasoned aloud, "what message does that send to every Black employee here? To every young person who looks to us as an example of what's possible?" Elizabeth nodded, understanding the dilemma. "That's for you to decide, Marcus. But whatever you choose, do it because it aligns with your core values, not because of external pressure, either to fight or to concede." As she left, Marcus sat alone in his office, contemplating the crossroads before him. The professional and personal costs of continuing the battle were mounting daily. Yet the cost of surrender, not just to himself, but to countless others, who faced similar discrimination without his resources or platform to fight back, seemed equally unbearable. His contemplation was interrupted by a knock at his door. Malcolm stood there, his eyes still swollen but his expression determined. "Dad, can I talk to you for a minute?" Marcus waved him in, surprised by his son's presence. "Shouldn't you be in school?" "Teacher workday," Malcolm explained, taking a seat across from his father. "Mom said you might be thinking about taking the airline's money and dropping the case." News traveled fast in their household. "I'm considering our options," Marcus acknowledged carefully. "This fight is affecting all of us in ways I didn't anticipate." Malcolm touched his bruised eye reflexively. "Because of this? That's nothing. You should hear the stuff Black kids at school deal with every day." The simple statement hit Marcus with unexpected force. His son was telling him that the incident on the plane, being humiliated and removed from his rightful seat, wasn't exceptional but rather part of a continuum of everyday racism that his children and their peers already navigated. "I've been thinking about it like it's my personal battle," Marcus realized aloud. But it's not, is it? Malcolm shook his head. Everyone at school is talking about it, my friends, their parents. Some say you should sue the airline for millions. Others say you're just causing trouble. But they're all watching to see what happens. And what do you think should happen? Marcus asked, genuinely curious about his son's perspective. Malcolm considered the question with a seriousness beyond his 14 years. I think if you let them pay you off, nothing changes. Maybe they're more careful around famous black people for a while, but they'll still treat regular black people the same way. Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus thought. His son had cut through all the complexity to the heart of the matter. This wasn't about compensation or even personal vindication. It was about challenging a system that devalued black lives and dignity as a matter of course. When did you get so wise? Marcus asked, managing a smile despite the weight of the decision before him. Malcolm shrugged. Mom says I get it from you. As his son left, Marcus felt a clarity that had eluded him during weeks of corporate and legal battles. The path forward wasn't about calculating costs and benefits in traditional terms. It was about recognizing that some principles transcended business considerations, that fighting for dignity and equal treatment wasn't optional, but essential, regardless of the price. The board meeting that afternoon would determine whether he maintained control of Innovate Tech. The ongoing legal threats from Sky Global could escalate further. The personal attacks and economic pressure might increase rather than subside. But for the first time since the battle began, Marcus felt certain of his course. Whatever happened next, he would not abandon the fight against a system that had humiliated him and countless others whose stories never made headlines. The cost of capitulation, to his integrity, to his children's understanding of justice, to the countless people watching his response, was simply too high. As he prepared for the board meeting that could end his leadership of the company he had founded, Marcus felt an unexpected sense of peace. Some battles were worth fighting, even at great personal cost. This, he now knew with certainty, was one of them. Rain pounded against the windows of Innovate Tech's conference room, mirroring the tension inside as Marcus faced his board of directors. For 2 hours they had debated the company's future, and by extension his continued leadership, as the IT battle with Sky Global Airlines escalated beyond anyone's expectations. The financial impact cannot be ignored, James Whitaker insisted, pointing to charts displaying the company's declining stock price and customer attrition. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. This crusade, however justified, is threatening everything we've built. Marcus listened silently, allowing each board member to express their concerns. Some were sympathetic to his stand against discrimination, but worried about the business consequences. Others clearly wished he would accept the airline's settlement, offer, and move on. Dr. Carter remained his most steadfast ally, reminding everyone that principles sometimes required sacrifices. As the discussion neared its conclusion, Marcus's assistant knocked urgently at the door. I'm sorry to interrupt, she apologized, but there's a Catherine Reynolds here insisting on speaking with Mr. Johnson immediately. She says it's urgent and relates directly to this meeting. The investigative journalist whose CNN report had exposed Sky Global's discriminatory practices was the last person Marcus expected to see at this critical juncture. Board members exchanged concerned glances. This is a closed meeting, James objected immediately. I believe we should hear what she has to say, Dr. Carter countered, especially if it directly impacts our current discussion. Elizabeth Vaughn, ever the pragmatist, turned to Marcus. Your call. It's your leadership we're discussing after all. Marcus considered for only a moment before nodding. Show her in. Catherine Reynolds entered with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to high-pressure situations. In her early 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, she carried a leather portfolio and a determination that filled the room. Thank you for seeing me, she addressed the board collectively. I apologize for the interruption, but what I've discovered couldn't wait. What exactly have you discovered, Ms. Reynolds? Elizabeth asked, her tone cautiously neutral. Catherine placed her portfolio on the table. Evidence that Sky Global Airlines has been engaging in a coordinated campaign to pressure Innovate Tech's clients and investors. I have emails from Sky Global executives to Richard Hamilton explicitly discussing strategies to, and I quote, make Johnson's fight too costly for his company to tolerate. The room fell silent as she withdrew documents and placed them on the EN table. These were provided by a whistleblower inside Sky Global's corporate affairs department. They reveal that the airline didn't just discriminate against Mr. Johnson. They've been actively working to destroy his company as punishment for standing up to them. Marcus reached for the nearest document, scanning its contents with growing disbelief. The email chain detailed specific companies to target, all Innovate Tech clients, with Hamilton, using his business connections to suggest they reconsider their relationship with a company whose leadership is distracted by personal vendettas. This is corporate sabotage, Dr. Carter stated, examining another document. Precisely, Catherine confirmed. And it goes deeper. I've uncovered internal airline documents showing Sky Global management was well aware of at least 12 discrimination complaints filed by black first-class passengers over the past 18 months. All were systematically dismissed without investigation. She turned specifically to Marcus. Your experience wasn't an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. It was part of a pattern the airline has deliberately concealed while gaslighting victims. Why bring this to us directly? James asked, skepticism evident in his voice. Why not just publish your findings? I'm publishing a comprehensive investigation tomorrow, Catherine explained. But given that you're meeting today to discuss Mr. Johnson's leadership, I felt an ethical obligation to ensure you had all relevant facts first. The campaign against Innovate Tech isn't the result of Mr. Johnson's actions. It's retribution from powerful people who expected him to accept discrimination quietly. As the board members processed this information, examining the documents Catherine had provided, the dynamics in the room visibly shifted. Even James Whitaker, who had been pushing hardest for Marcus to step aside, looked troubled by the evidence of deliberate sabotage against the company. If you'll excuse me, Catherine said, gathering her belongings, I should let you continue your discussion. My story runs at 6 a.m. tomorrow. After she departed, the board sat in stunned silence until Dr. Carter spoke. It appears we've been blaming the victim rather than the perpetrator. Elizabeth nodded slowly. If these documents are authentic, and I have no reason to doubt Ms. Reynolds' reputation for thorough fact-checking, we've been playing right into Sky Global's hands by considering leadership changes. This changes the equation considerably, another board member acknowledged. Marcus, who had remained silent throughout this revelation, finally spoke. The question isn't whether I should continue fighting discrimination. The question is whether we as a company will allow ourselves to be bullied into submission by those who perpetuate it. The vote that followed was unanimous in support of Marcus's continued leadership, a dramatic reversal from the divided board that had entered the meeting. More significantly, they authorized resources for both legal action against Sky Global for corporate sabotage and a comprehensive public relations strategy to reclaim the narrative. Have you ever witnessed a moment when truth finally came to light, after someone was wrongfully blamed? If you believe powerful corporations should be held accountable when they try to silence those who speak up against discrimination, hit like and subscribe to see how Marcus uses this turning point to fight back. Comment 1. If you think Catherine Reynolds deserves recognition for her investigative journalism. Or 2. If you believe whistleblowers inside companies are the true heroes in exposing corporate wrongdoing. What do you think will happen next? Will Sky Global finally be forced to make real changes, or will they find another way to fight back? By the time Catherine Reynolds' investigation was published the next morning, Innovate Tech was prepared with its own press release detailing the corporate sabotage campaign and announcing legal action against both Sky Global Airlines and Richard Hamilton personally. The timing couldn't have been better. Social media erupted with the hashtag #CharnedFirstClassWhileBlack, as thousands shared similar experiences of discrimination while traveling. Major civil rights organizations issued statements of support for Marcus. Several celebrities with large platforms shared Catherine's article, amplifying its reach exponentially. Sky Global's stock plummeted 13% in a single day, a loss of billions in market value that caught the attention of major shareholders. The company's initial response, denying the authenticity of the leaked documents and promising Legal action against defamatory reporting only intensified public skepticism. For Marcus, the vindication was bittersweet. While grateful that the truth was finally emerging, he remained focused on the broader issue rather than personal redemption. "This was never about me," he told Aisha as they watched coverage of the unfolding story from his office. "It's about challenging a system that treats people differently based on the color of their skin, then punishes them for speaking up about it." "Well, the system is definitely feeling the challenge now," Aisha Day replied, showing him her tablet. Major corporate customers of Sky Global, sensitive to the public relations disaster, were publicly announcing reviews of their travel contracts. The airline's competitors were seizing the opportunity, promoting their own diversity initiatives and non-discrimination policies. More significantly, Trevor Parker wasn't the only Sky Global employee coming forward. 3 other flight attendants had contacted Maya with corroborating accounts of the discriminatory practices they'd been trained to implement. Allison Davis, the crew supervisor who had threatened to remove Marcus from the flight, had resigned from the airline and was reportedly cooperating with investigators. The most unexpected development came later that day when Marcus received a call from Gregory Walsh of Apex Ventures, the investment firm that had declined to fund Innovate Tech after the airplane incident. "I owe you an apology," Walsh began without preamble. "I allowed Richard Hamilton's version of events to influence our decision, and that was wrong." "It was more than wrong," Marcus replied, unwilling to make this easy. "It was discrimination, by proxy." A pause. "You're right," Walsh admitted. "I'd like to reopen our discussion about potential investment, if you're still interested." Marcus wasn't sure how to feel about this sudden reversal. On one hand, Innovate Tech still needed the capital that Apex could provide. On the other, Walsh's initial willingness to side with Hamilton raised questions about his judgment and values. "We've had interest from several other investment groups since the true story broke," Marcus informed him, which was true, as multiple firms had reached out that morning. "I'll need to discuss any potential partnership with my team before making decisions." The exchange highlighted an important shift. Marcus was no longer the supplicant seeking approval or acceptance. The exposure of Sky Global's discriminatory practices and retaliatory campaign had changed the power dynamics, placing him in a position to set terms rather than accept them. This transformation extended beyond business relationships. Media outlets that had initially framed the incident as a dispute or misunderstanding were now requesting interviews with Marcus about systemic racism in corporate America. Organizations that had remained silent were suddenly eager to align themselves with his stand against discrimination. "It's amazing how quickly principles become popular when they're trending," Tanya observed dryly as they reviewed the flood of interview requests and statements of support. "True," Marcus acknowledged, "but I'll take opportunistic allies over active opponents if it helps create change." That evening, as the Johnson family gathered for dinner, a rarity in recent weeks, given the demands of the battle, they reflected on how dramatically the situation had shifted in just 24 hours. "Did you see Hamilton's company stock drop too?" Zoe reported, having monitored the financial news throughout the day. "Down 17%. Apparently, investors don't like companies whose leaders orchestrate discrimination and sabotage campaigns." "His board is meeting tomorrow," Marcus added. "Rumor has it they're discussing his future with the company." Malcolm looked up from his plate. "So you won?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I wouldn't say that yet. Exposing wrongdoing isn't the same as creating lasting change. Sky Global hasn't implemented new policies or held anyone accountable. Hamilton hasn't faced real consequences beyond financial losses. We've gained momentum, but the fight continues." "But people are listening now," Tanya pointed out. "That's significant." She was right. The conversation about discrimination in travel and corporate accountability had expanded far beyond one incident on one flight. People were sharing stories that had previously gone untold, creating a collective testimony that was harder to dismiss than individual complaints. The following morning brought news that Sky Global's largest institutional shareholders had requested an emergency meeting with the company's board of directors. By afternoon, Business news channels were reporting that CEO Thomas Wilson had been summoned to explain both the discriminatory practices and the subsequent cover-up efforts. When Marcus arrived at Innovate Tech's offices, he found the atmosphere transformed from the tense, uncertain environment of recent weeks. Employees greeted him with renewed confidence and pride. The company that had been under siege was now being recognized for standing firm against corporate bullying and discrimination. Aisha met him with more encouraging news. Two of the clients, who had recently pulled their contracts, were reaching out to restart negotiations, citing new information about the circumstances affecting their previous decision. They saw the writing on the wall, she noted. Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of this story now. But the most significant development came midday when Maya rushed into Marcus's office without knocking, her typically composed demeanor shattered by excitement. "You won't believe who just contacted me," she announced breathlessly. "Jennifer Lawson, Sky Global's new interim general counsel. Apparently, their board put Wilson on administrative leave this morning and is cleaning house. She wants to discuss settlement terms." "What are they offering?" Marcus asked, careful not to reveal too much emotion. "That's the thing," Maya replied, barely containing her satisfaction. "They're not dictating terms this time. They're asking what it would take to resolve this to your satisfaction. They're actually scared." The shift was seismic. The corporation that had dismissed Marcus's experience, threatened him with legal action, and orchestrated a campaign to destroy his company was now approaching with hat in hand, seeking terms. "Tell her I'll need to consider what appropriate resolution looks like," Marcus instructed. "This isn't just about compensation anymore. It's about systemic change within their organization." As Maya left to relay the message, Marcus turned to Aisha. "What do you think meaningful resolution looks like in this case?" She didn't hesitate. "Comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all customer-facing staff. Independent auditing of passenger complaints with transparent reporting. Disciplinary action for everyone involved in both the original incident and the retaliation campaign. And yes, substantial financial penalties to ensure the lesson sticks." Marcus nodded in agreement. "Plus a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing and commitment to change. No confidentiality agreements or NDAs. They'll fight that last part hard," Aisha predicted. "Admitting fault publicly opens them to other lawsuits." "That's exactly why it's necessary," Marcus countered. "If there are other victims, they deserve justice too." The negotiations with Sky Global's new leadership team began the following day and stretched over a week of intense discussions. As Aisha had predicted, the airline resisted public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, offering increasingly large financial settlements in exchange for confidentiality. Marcus remained firm. Accountability requires transparency. Private payments don't create public change. His stance was strengthened by continuing revelations. Catherine Reynolds published a follow-up investigation revealing that Sky Global had settled at least 23 discrimination complaints over the past 5 years, all with strict confidentiality provisions that prevented victims from sharing their experiences. The pattern of silencing victims through financial settlements and NDAs had allowed the airline to maintain discriminatory practices without public accountability. Exactly what Marcus was refusing to perpetuate with his own case. The breakthrough came when Sky Global's board, facing mounting shareholder pressure and continuous negative publicity, replaced their negotiating team with representatives more amenable to substantive reform. The new team arrived with a different approach. "We recognize that no financial settlement alone can address the systemic issues this situation has revealed," the new lead negotiator acknowledged in their first meeting. "Our board has authorized me to discuss comprehensive policy changes alongside appropriate compensation." For the first time, Marcus felt he was being heard not just as an individual complainant, but as an advocate for broader change. The conversation shifted from damage control to genuine reform, exactly what he had been seeking from the beginning. The final agreement, reached after 3 more days of negotiation, included everything Marcus and his team had prioritized. 1. Comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all Sky Global employees, developed in consultation with civil rights experts. 2. Revision of all passenger management policies and training materials to eliminate biased language and practices. 3. Creation of an independent review board to assess discrimination complaints, with quarterly public reporting. 4. Disciplinary action against staff involved in Marcus's incident and subsequent cover-up attempts. 5. A public statement acknowledging the airline's failure to properly address discrimination and committing to specific reform. 6. Financial compensation for Marcus, which he announced would be used to establish a foundation supporting victims of discrimination in travel and hospitality industries. Perhaps most significantly, Richard Hamilton was facing his own reckoning. His company's board had placed him on indefinite leave pending investigation of his role in both the airplane incident and the subsequent retaliation campaign against Innovate Tech. Several of his business partners were distancing themselves, uncomfortable with the negative publicity and ethical questions his actions had raised. As news of the settlement spread, Marcus found himself at the center of an unexpected movement. Civil rights organizations invited him to speak about holding corporations accountable for discrimination. Business schools requested his participation in case studies about ethical leadership under pressure. Major companies sought his input on reviewing their own customer service policies for potential bias. The platform he had gained, though never sought, provided an opportunity to advocate for changes extending far beyond one airline or one incident. The personal cost had been substantial, but the potential impact was greater than he could have imagined when standing in that airplane aisle, boarding pass in hand, facing the first of many attempts to deny his dignity and belonging. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I just quietly accepted being moved to economy that day," Marcus reflected to Tanya as they prepared for bed one night, the weight of recent weeks finally beginning to lift. "If I'd decided it wasn't worth the trouble to fight." "You wouldn't be you," she replied simply, "and nothing would have changed." She was right, of course. The system relied on people choosing the path of least resistance, accepting small indignities and injustices rather than challenging the structures that produced them. Change required those willing to absorb the cost of resistance, to stand firm, even when it would be easier to surrender. As Marcus drifted toward sleep, he found himself thinking of Malcolm's black eye, earned defending his father's right to be treated with dignity. "Some battles choose you," he murmured, the words following him into dreams not of conflict but of the world they were working to create, one where such battles would no longer be necessary. The morning sunshine streamed through the windows of Innovate Tech's Atlanta headquarters, reflecting off the polished surfaces of the executive floor as Marcus strode toward the conference room. For the first time in weeks, his step was light, unburdened by the constant pressure of fighting a seemingly insurmountable opponent. The settlement with Sky Global Airlines represented not just personal vindication, but the promise of systemic change, exactly what he had been fighting for since that fateful flight. Aisha waited in the conference room, surrounded by documents outlining their strategy for rebuilding relationships with clients who had pulled back during the controversy. Her smile matched his own optimistic mood. "The Peterson Group called this morning," she reported as he took his seat. "They want to restart discussions about implementing our AI platform across their entire operation." "Let me guess," Marcus replied with knowing amusement. "They've had a change of heart now that Sky Global has admitted wrongdoing and our stock is climbing again." "Something like that," Aisha confirmed. "Their CEO suddenly has tremendous respect for your principled stand and believes your vision aligns perfectly with their corporate values." They shared a moment of cynical laughter at the fair-weather nature of corporate solidarity. The reality was transparent. Now that Marcus had emerged victorious rather than vanquished, former critics were rushing to realign themselves with the winning side. "Should we make them grovel a little?" Aisha suggested mischievously. "Maybe. Increase our rates for clients who abandon ship?" "Tempting," Marcus admitted. "But no, we maintain our professional standards regardless of how others behaved during the crisis. The best revenge is exceptional performance and success." Their strategy session continued productively, mapping out recovery plans and growth initiatives, now that the existential threat to the company had receded. The future looked promising again. InnovateTech's innovative technology remained industry-leading, and the publicity surrounding Marcus's stand against discrimination had actually raised the company's profile among potential clients who valued ethical leadership. As they wrapped up, Marcus's assistant appeared at the door with an unusual expression, concern mixed with confusion. "Mr. Johnson, there's a news alert you should see immediately," she said, activating the conference room's wall screen with a remote. The broadcast showed Thomas Wilson, Sky Global's CEO, who had been placed on administrative leave following the settlement announcement. Rather than appearing contrite or resigned as might be expected, Wilson projected defiant confidence as he addressed a press conference. After careful review of the facts, Sky Global Airlines regrets the premature statements made by interim leadership regarding alleged discriminatory practices, Wilson announced, reading from a prepared statement. "While we remain committed to fair treatment of all passengers, recent claims against our company have been greatly exaggerated for financial and political gain." Marcus and Aisha exchanged incredulous glances as Wilson continued. The settlement reached with Marcus Johnson was not an admission of systematic discrimination, but rather a business decision to end a distracting controversy. Mr. Johnson's experience, while unfortunate, was a service failure, not evidence of racial bias. "What the hell?" Aisha exclaimed. "They're completely walking back the settlement terms." Marcus watched in stunned silence as Wilson went further. "I have resumed my duties as CEO with the full support of our board, committed to protecting Sky Global's reputation against unfounded accusations. Our internal investigation has found no evidence of the discriminatory training practices alleged in recent media reports." The press conference concluded with Wilson announcing a defamation lawsuit against parties who have damaged our company's reputation through false claims, an obvious reference to Marcus, Catherine Reynolds, and possibly Trevor Parker and other whistleblowers. As the broadcast ended, Marcus's phone erupted with notifications, messages from Maya, Dr. Carter, board members and journalists seeking comment on this unexpected development. "How is this possible?" Aisha demanded, already typing furiously on her tablet. The settlement had clear terms acknowledging discriminatory practices. They can't just pretend it didn't happen. Marcus was asking himself the same question. The agreement they had negotiated had been clear and specific, with Sky Global committing to concrete actions to address discrimination. Yet here was Wilson, supposedly removed from leadership, not only back in charge but actively undermining everything they had achieved. Maya arrived minutes later, breathless and clutching legal documents. "The Sky Global board vote was reversed," she explained without preamble. "Hamilton pulled strings with major shareholders. They called an emergency meeting last night and reinstated Wilson by a narrow margin." "Can they legally repudiate a settlement they've already agreed to?" Marcus asked. "Not without consequences," Maya replied. "But they're clearly betting that a protracted legal battle will exhaust our resources and resolve. They're going back to their original strategy, make fighting them so costly that you'll eventually give up." Marcus absorbed this information with growing anger. Just when it seemed the battle was won, the opposition had regrouped and launched a counteroffensive. The brief period of vindication was evaporating, replaced by the prospect of an even more challenging fight ahead. "There's more," Maya continued grimly. "Hamilton has filed a personal defamation lawsuit against you, claiming you falsely accused him of racial discrimination and corporate sabotage. He's seeking $20 million in damages." The escalation was breathtaking in its audacity. After orchestrating discrimination and a retaliatory campaign against InnovateTech, Hamilton was now positioning himself as the victim, using the legal system as a weapon to silence Marcus. "They're not just fighting back," Aisha observed, scrolling through news updates on her tablet. "They're trying to rewrite the entire narrative. Look at this." She turned the screen toward Marcus, showing a business news site with the headline, "Aviation Industry Expert Questions Johnson's Account of Sky Global Incident." The article quoted an anonymous senior airline consultant, suggesting that Marcus had been argumentative and disruptive on the flight, necessitating his relocation to economy class. "They're going full scorched earth," Maya concluded. "Attacking your credibility, questioning your motives and trying to frame you as the aggressor rather than the victim. Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing the dramatic reversal of fortunes. After weeks of struggle leading to what had seemed like meaningful victory, they were now facing an even more aggressive opposition, determined to discredit everything they had accomplished. "What about Catherine Reynolds' reporting?" he asked. "The leaked documents proving discrimination? The whistleblower testimonies?" "They're claiming the documents were taken out of context or fabricated," Aisha replied, still scanning news updates. "And they're putting enormous pressure on current and former employees to recant or stay silent." The conference room door opened, again as Tanya arrived, having heard the news at her law firm. Her expression reflected the same disbelief and anger they all felt. "Hamilton's connections run deeper than we realized," she reported. "He's got ties to 3 members of Sky Global's board through other business ventures. This was coordinated, letting the settlement happen to calm public outrage, then countering once media attention had moved on. The strategy was as brilliant as it was unethical. Allow the appearance of accountability and reform just long enough for public interest to wane, then launch an aggressive counter-campaign to discredit accusers and re-establish the status quo. So what do we do?" Aisha asked, the question hanging heavily in the air. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang with a call from Elizabeth Vaughn. The board was requesting another emergency meeting in light of the new developments. The implication was clear. The renewed battle with Sky Global and Hamilton threatened to drag Innovate Tech back into the controversy, just as it was beginning to recover. As the day progressed, the counterattack intensified. Private investigators hired by Hamilton's legal team were contacting former Innovate Tech employees, seeking damaging information about Marcus's management style and business practices. Media outlets sympathetic to Sky Global ran stories questioning whether claims of discrimination were being weaponized to extract settlements from corporations. Most disturbing of all, Trevor Parker, whose courageous decision to share internal documents had been crucial in exposing Sky Global's discriminatory practices, had recanted his testimony. In a stiff, clearly coached statement, he claimed he had misunderstood the airline's policies and had been unduly influenced by the media narrative surrounding the incident. "They got to him," Maya concluded after watching Parker's statement. "Probably threatened his future employment prospects in the industry." By the time the Innovate Tech board convened late that afternoon, the situation had deteriorated further. Hamilton's legal team had filed motions to freeze certain company assets pending resolution of his defamation claim. 2 more media outlets had run stories questioning Marcus's account of the original incident. Sky Global had announced a new Passenger Respect initiative designed to demonstrate their commitment to fair treatment, a transparent attempt to appear responsive while actually denying any previous discrimination. The board meeting began with a somber assessment of these developments and their potential impact on Innovate Tech's recovery. While individual members expressed personal support for Marcus, the business concerns were undeniable. "These new lawsuits could take years to resolve," James Whitaker pointed out. "Even if we ultimately prevail, the ongoing litigation will continue to distract from our core business and deter potential clients and investors." Elizabeth Vaughn, though more sympathetic to Marcus's position, raised practical concerns. "Our legal costs are already substantial and will increase significantly if we're fighting both Sky Global and Hamilton simultaneously. Is this the best use of company resources?" Even Dr. Carter, Marcus's most steadfast ally on the board, acknowledged the gravity of the situation. "They're betting that a publicly traded company can't sustain a prolonged battle against these combined forces. From a purely business perspective, they may be right." The unspoken question hung in the air. Was continuing this fight compatible with Marcus's fiduciary duty to the company and its shareholders? As the discussion continued, Marcus's phone buzzed with an unexpected text message from a number he didn't recognize. "Critical information about Hamilton and Wilson. Need to meet privately. Parking garage, level 3, south corner, 8 p.m. Come alone. Verification code, Parker's flash drive." The reference to Trevor Parker's flash drive, which had contained the damning internal documents from Sky Global, suggested this was someone with inside knowledge of their case. But after the day's developments, Marcus was wary of potential traps. He showed the message to Tanya during a break in the board meeting. Could be legitimate, she conceded, or could be Hamilton's people trying to set you up somehow. Either way, you shouldn't go alone. They agreed that Marcus would attend the mysterious meeting, but with precautions. Tanya and a private security consultant would monitor from a distance. Marcus would wear a concealed recording device. The meeting location would be scouted in advance for any signs of ambush. As the board meeting reconvened, Marcus found his attention divided between the ongoing discussion of Innovate Tech's options and speculation about what might await him at the parking garage that evening. Who had sent the message? What information could be important enough to warrant such cloak-and-dagger arrangements? The board ultimately deferred any decisions about the company's strategy regarding the new lawsuits, acknowledging that they needed more time to assess the rapidly evolving situation. It was a temporary reprieve, but Marcus knew the questions would return, possibly with greater urgency if Sky Global and Hamilton's counterattack continued to gain momentum. At precisely 8 p.m., Marcus entered level 3 of the office building's parking garage, every sense heightened. The space was dimly lit and eerily quiet at this hour, most employees having departed for the day. He proceeded cautiously toward the south corner, aware of Tanya and the security consultant watching from a vehicle parked one level above. A figure emerged from behind a concrete pillar, a woman in her 50s wearing a Sky Global Airlines executive uniform, her face tense with anxiety. "Mr. Johnson," she greeted him quietly. "Thank you for coming. I'm Patricia Evans, Senior Vice President of Operations at Sky Global." Marcus recognized the name immediately. Evans was part of Sky Global's senior leadership team, reporting directly to Thomas Wilson. Her presence here, apparently seeking a clandestine meeting with the man her company was actively suing, was extraordinary. "Why the secrecy, Ms. Evans?" Marcus asked, maintaining a cautious distance. "Because what I'm about to share could end my career," she replied frankly. "Possibly worse, given what's at stake for the people involved." She removed a USB drive from her pocket. This contains communications between Thomas Wilson and Richard Hamilton, going back 3 years. Their relationship isn't just social, they're business partners in several ventures outside the airline, including a real estate development company that isn't publicly connected to either of them. Marcus accepted the drive cautiously. "Why? Are you giving me this?" Evans's expression hardened. "Because what they're doing isn't just unethical, it's corrupt. The discrimination you experienced wasn't a training issue or a misunderstanding. It was a direct result of policies Wilson implemented to benefit Hamilton and their shared business interests." She explained that Hamilton received preferential treatment not just because of his status, but because he and Wilson had a financial arrangement. Hamilton's real estate company provided discounted properties to Wilson and other Sky Global executives in exchange for various perks, including guaranteed first-class upgrades regardless of availability. "When you refused to give up your seat," Evans continued, "you weren't just challenging one incident of discrimination, you were threatening a corrupt system that benefits both of them financially." The revelation placed everything in a new light. What Marcus had experienced wasn't just racial discrimination, though that was certainly a factor, but part of a broader pattern of corruption and self-dealing at the airline's highest levels. "The board doesn't know about this," Evans added, "or at least most members don't. When they authorized the settlement with you, Wilson and Hamilton began pressuring key shareholders to reverse course, using connections and financial leverage most of us didn't even know existed. Why are you risking your position to share this?" Marcus asked, still not entirely trusting her motives. Evans hesitated before answering. "I've been with Sky Global for 22 years. I believe in what this company could be. What Wilson and Hamilton are doing isn't just hurting people like you, it's destroying the airline from within." She gestured to the drive in his hand. "Everything's documented there. Bank transfers, property records, emails discussing how to handle your specific case." As the meeting concluded, Evans offered one final piece of information. "They're not just targeting you. They've started investigating Catherine Reynolds, looking for anything they can use to discredit her reporting. And they've threatened Trevor Parker with more than just employment blacklisting. They have something on him personally that forced his recantation. The drive Evans provided proved to be exactly what she claimed: a comprehensive record of corruption, self-dealing, and cover-up efforts extending far beyond Marcus's individual case. Working through the night with Maya and a trusted data security expert, they verified the authenticity of the documents and began mapping out their implications. By morning, they had outlined a strategy that would transform their defense against Sky Global and Hamilton into a counteroffensive targeting the corrupt relationship at the heart of both the original discrimination and the subsequent retaliation campaign. "This changes everything," Maya observed as they prepared for an early call with Catherine Reynolds to share the new evidence. They thought they were fighting a discrimination case they could eventually discredit. They have no idea we're about to expose a years-long pattern of corporate corruption. For the first time since Wilson's shocking press conference, Marcus felt the momentum shifting back in their favor. The battle wasn't over. Far from it. But they now possessed information that could fundamentally alter its trajectory. As he headed home to shower and change before the day's meetings, Marcus reflected on the unpredictable path this fight had taken. What had begun as a personal stand against discrimination had evolved into something much larger: an exposure of how racial bias, corporate corruption, and abuse of power were intertwined in ways that affected countless people beyond himself. The counterattack had been fierce, but it had also revealed the true nature of the system they were fighting, and provided the very weapons they would need to dismantle it. The gleaming conference room on the 40th floor of Atlanta's premier legal offices hummed with tension as Marcus faced the most critical meeting of his professional life. Innovate Tech's entire board of directors had assembled for what had been described as an existential decision point following the explosive revelations from Patricia Evans' USB drive. Elizabeth Vaughn called the meeting to order with uncharacteristic solemnity. "Before we begin formal discussions, I want to acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances that bring us together today. The evidence Mr. Johnson has obtained regarding Sky Global's leadership presents both opportunity and significant risk for Innovate Tech." James Whitaker, long the most skeptical board member regarding Marcus's battle, leaned forward. "Let's be absolutely clear about what we're considering. Using this information doesn't just continue our existing conflict with Sky Global. It escalates it dramatically by directly accusing their CEO and a prominent businessman of corruption and conspiracy." "That's correct," Maya confirmed from her position beside Marcus. "But it also transforms the narrative from a disputed discrimination claim to documented corporate malfeasance, reaching the highest levels of Sky Global's leadership." The stakes couldn't be higher. After 3 days of careful preparation, Marcus and his team had developed a comprehensive strategy for deploying Patricia Evans' evidence. The plan would effectively counter Sky Global's renewed attacks and potentially force fundamental changes in the airline's leadership and practices. But implementation required board approval. Despite the strength of the evidence, using it would commit Innovate Tech to an even more intense battle against powerful opponents, who had already demonstrated their willingness to use every available weapon against Marcus and his company. "The financial implications alone are staggering," another board member noted, reviewing projections prepared by the CFO. "Best case, we disrupt their counterattack and force a more favorable settlement. Worst case, we face years of expanded litigation that could cost tens of millions." Dr. Carter, who had remained silent until now, spoke with the measured cadence that commanded attention. "Perhaps we should hear directly from Marcus before proceeding further. This battle began with his personal experience, evolved to implicate his leadership of our company, and now touches on matters of corporate ethics that extend far beyond either. His perspective should guide our deliberations." All eyes turned to Marcus. The room fell silent as he rose from his chair, the weight of the moment palpable in the air. "When I boarded that flight 2 months ago," he began, "I could never have imagined standing here today, contemplating actions that might reshape an entire corporation and impact thousands of lives. What began as one black man being removed from his rightful seat has revealed something much larger. A system where discrimination, corruption, and retaliation are not bugs, but features." He activated the room's display screen, showing key documents from Evans's drive. "These records prove that what happened to me wasn't an isolated incident or a training failure. It was the direct result of policies designed to benefit a corrupt relationship between Thomas Wilson and Richard Hamilton. Policies that systematically disadvantaged passengers of color when their presence conflicted with the preferences of priority customers. Marcus navigated through evidence of property transfers, shell companies, and explicit communications about how to handle the Johnson situation after it gained public attention. Our choice today isn't simply about whether to continue fighting discrimination, he continued. It's about whether we will allow powerful individuals to use their positions to punish those who challenge corrupt systems, whether we'll permit them to weaponize their resources to silence opposition and maintain the status quo. The presentation continued for nearly an hour, as Marcus outlined both the evidence itself and the strategic plan his team had developed for its deployment. The approach was comprehensive. Legal action targeting both corporate and personal liability for Wilson and Hamilton, regulatory complaints highlighting violations of SEC disclosure requirements, media strategy leveraging Catherine Reynolds's investigative expertise, and outreach to Sky Global board members unaware of the corruption at the company's highest levels. When he concluded, the board's reactions ranged from stunned silence to visible outrage at what the evidence revealed. The systematic nature of the corruption, combined with the explicit targeting of Marcus and Innovatech in retaliation for challenging it, painted a picture far more damning than even the original discrimination claim. Elizabeth was the first to respond. I think I speak for many of us when I say the scope of what you've uncovered exceeds anything we anticipated. This isn't just about your experience on that flight anymore. It's about corporate governance, securities violations, and potentially criminal conspiracy. Which is precisely why we need to proceed with extreme caution, James countered. The more serious the allegations, the more fiercely they'll fight back. We have a responsibility to this company and its shareholders to consider whether this battle, however justified, serves Innovatech's interests. The debate that followed was intense, with board members weighing moral imperatives against fiduciary responsibilities, short-term costs against long-term principles. Throughout the discussion, Marcus listened carefully, recognizing that while he had initiated this fight, its continuation now affected everyone connected to the company he had built. Just as the conversation seemed to be circling without resolution, the conference room door opened unexpectedly. Heads turned as Zoe Johnson, Marcus's 16-year-old daughter, entered, followed by an apologetic assistant who had clearly been unable to prevent her unscheduled appearance. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Zoe said, her voice steady despite the intimidating setting. "But I need to speak to the board before you vote." Marcus started to rise, to explain that this wasn't the appropriate time or place, but Dr. Carter raised a hand to stop him. "I'd like to hear what Ms. Johnson has to say," the elder board member declared. "Sometimes wisdom comes from unexpected sources." With the board's attention now fixed on her, Zoe took a deep breath. "You're all discussing whether my dad should continue fighting against people who discriminated against him, then tried to destroy his company for speaking up about it. You're talking about it like it's just a business decision, weighing costs and benefits as if there's a spreadsheet that can tell you what's right." Her directness commanded the room's attention. This wasn't a child interrupting adult business, but a young woman speaking with moral clarity about matters that affected her family directly. "I've watched my father struggle with this decision every day," she continued. "I've seen him question whether standing up for what's right is worth the cost to his company, his reputation, our family's safety. I've listened to him on the phone, with investors who suddenly developed concerns after being perfectly happy with his leadership for years." Zoe looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. "But here's what you might not understand. For black kids like me and my brother, watching our father accept discrimination to protect his business would teach us a lesson too. That our dignity has a price tag, that standing up against injustice is only acceptable when it's convenient, and doesn't threaten the status quo." The room fell silent as her words landed with undeniable impact. In that moment, the abstract discussion of corporate strategy and legal risk became concrete and personal, not just about Marcus Johnson, CEO, but about a father showing his children what courage looked like in the face of systemic injustice. "My dad built this company to create something meaningful, not just to make money," Zoe concluded. If Innovatech abandons this fight now, you might protect short-term profits, but you'll lose something far more valuable, the integrity that made this company worth building in the first place. With that, she nodded respectfully to the board and turned to leave. Marcus met her eyes as she passed, his expression conveying pride beyond words. After the door closed behind her, Dr. Carter broke the silence. I believe Ms. Johnson has provided the perspective we needed. This is indeed a business decision, but one that must account for values that don't appear on balance sheets: integrity, justice, and the courage to stand against corruption, even when doing so carries cost. The vote that followed was unanimous in support of Marcus's proposed strategy, a dramatic shift from the divided board that had begun the meeting. Whatever the outcome of the battle ahead, Innovatech would face it united behind its founders' principled stand. As board members departed, Elizabeth lingered to speak with Marcus privately. Your daughter is remarkable, she observed. She cut through hours of corporate deliberation with 2 minutes of moral clarity. She gets that from her mother, Marcus replied with a small smile. Perhaps, Elizabeth acknowledged, but she also learned it from watching you these past weeks. Whatever happens next, remember that lesson may be the most important outcome of this entire ordeal. The implementation of their strategy began immediately. Catherine Reynolds received exclusive access to key documents proving the corrupt relationship between Wilson and Hamilton, with her investigative report scheduled to publish in 48 hours. Maya filed expanded legal complaints naming both men personally and detailing specific violations of securities laws, fiduciary duties, and anti-corruption statutes. Most significantly, a detailed dossier was delivered to each Sky Global board member, excluding those with known ties to Wilson and Hamilton, documenting how the CEO had misused company resources and exposed the airline to substantial legal and reputational risk. The response was swift and dramatic. By the following morning, Sky Global's stock had dropped 15% on rumors of leadership irregularities. Financial analysts who had previously dismissed Marcus's discrimination claims as a minor public relations issue were now raising alarms about potential governance failures and regulatory investigations. Hamilton's business empire faced similar turbulence as his connections to Sky Global's operations came under scrutiny. 2 clients of his real estate development firm announced they were pausing planned projects pending clarification of concerning reports about business practices. The most dramatic development came that afternoon when Marcus received an unexpected call from Jennifer Lawson, the attorney who had briefly served as Sky Global's interim general counsel before Wilson's reinstatement. The board has called an emergency meeting, she informed him without preamble. Several members were blindsided by the evidence you provided and are demanding explanations Wilson can't provide. They've asked if you would be willing to address them directly tomorrow morning. The invitation was unprecedented, the target of ongoing litigation being asked to speak directly to the board of his corporate opponent. After consulting with Maya, Marcus agreed, recognizing the potential for resolution that would address the structural issues rather than merely settle his individual claim. The following morning found Marcus in Sky Global's corporate headquarters, a glass and steel monument to air travel adorned with the company's logo and heritage. The contrast between this visit and his treatment on their aircraft 2 months earlier wasn't lost on him as he was escorted to the executive floor with deferential courtesy. The boardroom projected power and tradition, with model aircraft from throughout the airline's history displayed in illuminated cases along one wall. 9 board members sat around a massive table, their expressions ranging from openly hostile to cautiously neutral. Thomas Wilson was conspicuously absent, having been asked to recuse himself from this particular meeting. Board Chair Eleanor Richardson, a distinguished former federal judge whose reputation for integrity had initially made her appointment surprising for a company with Sky Global's issues, opened the proceedings. Mr. Johnson, thank you for agreeing to meet with us under these extraordinary circumstances. We've reviewed the materials you provided and have serious concerns about their implications for our company. We've invited you here to understand directly from you what resolution you believe would appropriately address both your individual experience and the broader issues these documents have revealed. It was the opening Marcus had hoped for, not a defensive negotiation, but an opportunity to advocate for meaningful change. For the next hour, he outlined not just the discrimination he had experienced, but the systematic problems it represented, supported by the evidence Patricia Evans had provided. "The issue isn't just that I was removed from my seat," he explained, displaying the internal training materials that revealed biased assumptions about who belonged in premium cabins. "It's that your company created systems that predictably produced discriminatory outcomes, then attacked those who dared to challenge those systems." The most damning evidence came in the form of emails between Wilson and Hamilton discussing how to handle the Johnson situation after it gained public attention. Far from showing concern about potential discrimination, the communications revealed their primary focus was protecting their business relationship and retaliating against Marcus for refusing to accept the initial token compensation offer. "These aren't the actions of leaders who made a mistake and wish to correct it," Marcus noted. "They're the actions of individuals using corporate resources to punish someone for challenging practices that benefited them personally at the expense of your passengers, your employees, and ultimately your shareholders." Several board members appeared genuinely disturbed by the evidence, particularly those who had apparently been kept in the dark about Wilson's relationship with Hamilton and the coordinated campaign against Innovate Tech. Others remained skeptical, questioning the provenance of the documents and suggesting they might be taken out of context. "What exactly are you seeking, Mr. Johnson?" one director asked bluntly. "A larger settlement? Public apology? What would resolve this situation from your perspective?" The question represented exactly the mindset Marcus was trying to change, the assumption that every complaint could be resolved with sufficient money or performative contrition rather than structural reform. "What I'm seeking isn't primarily about me," he replied. "It's about ensuring no other passenger faces what I experienced, and no other person or company who challenges discrimination faces the retaliation campaign Innovate Tech has endured." He outlined specific changes needed: removal of leaders who had participated in discrimination and retaliation, comprehensive reform of training and passenger treatment policies, independent auditing of future complaints, and perhaps most importantly, abandonment of the practice of using NDAs and confidential settlements to silence victims of discrimination. "The problem isn't just individual bad actors," Marcus emphasized. "It's systems designed to protect those in power rather than ensure equal treatment. Meaningful resolution requires changing those systems, not just compensating individual victims while keeping the machinery of discrimination intact." As the meeting approached its conclusion, Chair Richardson asked a final question that cut to the heart of the matter. "If the board were to implement the changes you've outlined, including leadership accountability, would you be willing to work collaboratively toward resolution rather than continuing an adversarial legal approach?" It was the opening Marcus had hoped for, an indication that at least some board members recognized the need for fundamental change rather than mere damage control. "Absolutely," he confirmed. "My goal has never been to damage Sky Global or extract maximum penalties. It's been to create meaningful change that ensures what happened to me doesn't happen to others. If the board commits to that same goal, I believe we can find a path forward that serves justice while allowing both our organizations to move beyond this conflict." As Marcus departed the meeting, he had no illusions about the battle still ahead. Wilson and Hamilton would fight ferociously to protect themselves, using every resource at their disposal. Some board members clearly remained skeptical or outright hostile to his claims, despite the evidence presented. But for the first time, he sensed genuine possibility for the kind of structural change he had been seeking since that moment on the plane when dignity and belonging were denied based on the color of his skin. The confrontation had moved from individual grievance to corporate accountability, creating space for transformation that individual litigation alone might never have achieved. That evening, as Marcus briefed his team on the board meeting, breaking news flashed across their screens. Sky Global Airlines had announced the immediate removal of Thomas Wilson as CEO pending investigation of serious allegations regarding abuse of position and conflict of interest. The board had appointed an interim leadership team and engaged an independent law firm to conduct a comprehensive review of the company's practices regarding passenger treatment and complaint handling. Simultaneously, Richard Hamilton's company issued a statement that he would be taking a leave of absence to address personal matters, with day-to-day operations transferring to his executive team. The coordinated timing of the announcements suggested the beginning of damage control efforts by both organizations. "They're cutting them loose," Aisha observed, the significance of the development evident in her voice. "The boards are trying to contain the damage by isolating Wilson and Hamilton." "It's a start," Marcus acknowledged, "but only that. Removing individual leaders without addressing the systems they created won't prevent similar problems in the future." The real test would come in the days ahead as both companies moved beyond initial crisis management to more substantive responses. Would they commit to meaningful reform or simply replace the most visible problems while maintaining the underlying structures that enable discrimination and retaliation? For now, though, the removal of Wilson and Hamilton represented vindication of what Marcus had been arguing since that day on the plane, that what he experienced wasn't an isolated service failure, but evidence of leadership that tolerated, enabled, and in some cases actively promoted discriminatory treatment when it served their interests. As the team dispersed for the evening, Dr. Carter lingered behind, his expression thoughtful. "I've been fighting versions of this battle for over 50 years, the elder board member reflected. "What you've accomplished here, forcing accountability at the highest levels, is remarkable." "We haven't won yet," Marcus cautioned. "Perhaps not completely," Dr. Carter acknowledged. "But you've changed the terms of engagement. They're no longer debating whether discrimination occurred. They're scrambling to contain the fallout from it being exposed. That shift alone represents significant progress." Marcus considered these words as he drove home, the Atlanta skyline illuminated against the night sky. The path forward remained uncertain, with potential for either meaningful reform or superficial changes designed primarily for public relations benefit. But one thing was clear. The confrontation had expanded beyond his individual experience to challenge the systems and structures that enabled discrimination to persist despite decades of legal prohibitions and corporate diversity statements. Whatever happened next, that expanded focus represented a victory that individual compensation or apology alone could never have achieved. The climactic confrontation wasn't over, but its nature had fundamentally changed. From one man seeking justice to a systemic challenge that neither Sky Global nor corporations like it could easily dismiss or deflect. The transformation represented exactly what Marcus had been fighting for since that moment in the airplane aisle when his dignity and belonging had been questioned because of the color of his skin. 1 year later, Marcus Johnson stood at the gate in Atlanta's International Terminal, boarding pass in hand for Sky Global Airlines Flight 1237 to San Francisco. The scene mirrored his fateful journey 12 months earlier, but almost everything else had changed. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," the gate agent greeted him, scanning his boarding pass with professional courtesy. "Thank you for flying with us today. You're in first class, seat 3A. The simple transaction, being acknowledged, having his documentation accepted without question, proceeding to his assigned seat without challenge, represented the most basic level of dignity and respect that all passengers deserved. Yet Marcus knew better than most how easily such fundamentals could be denied based on unconscious bias or explicit discrimination. As he settled into his first-class seat, a flight attendant approached with genuine warmth. "Mr. Johnson, welcome aboard. Can I offer you a pre-departure beverage?" Marcus recognized her, Allison Davis, the crew supervisor who had threatened to remove him from the aircraft during the original incident. Her presence was no coincidence. It was part of the comprehensive settlement agreement finalized 6 months earlier after intense negotiation between Innovate Tech, Sky Global's new leadership, and regulatory authorities. "Sparkling water would be fine, Ms. Davis," he replied. "How has the new training program been going?" Her expression reflected both discomfort and determination, the complex emotions of someone confronting past mistakes while working toward redemption. "It's been enlightening," she admitted, "challenging but necessary." Under the settlement terms, Sky Global had implemented mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, with certain employees involved in documented discrimination, incidents required to participate in more intensive programs and community engagement. Rather than being terminated, Allison and several other crew members had chosen this path to accountability and growth. "I appreciate your commitment to the process," Marcus told her sincerely. "Real change happens when people are willing to examine uncomfortable truths and adjust their perspective." The exchange represented the philosophy at the heart of the resolution Marcus had ultimately achieved, one focused not merely on punishment or compensation, but on structural reform and genuine cultural change. The journey to this moment had been neither simple nor straightforward. After the dramatic removal of Thomas Wilson and Richard Hamilton from their respective leadership positions, both companies had entered periods of intense internal examination and external pressure. For Sky Global, the process began with an independent investigation that revealed discrimination extending far beyond Marcus's experience. Dozens of similar incidents had been documented, but buried through confidential settlements and aggressive legal tactics designed to silence victims rather than address underlying issues. The most damning findings involved a systematic pattern of preferential treatment for certain passengers, primarily white, male, and affiliated with partner businesses, at the expense of others, with employees evaluated partly on their discretion in implementing these unwritten policies. Training materials included subtle but unmistakable guidance on identifying passengers who appear out of place in premium cabins and finding appropriate solutions when conflicts arose over limited resources. Faced with these revelations and the threat of both regulatory action and class action lawsuits from other affected passengers, Sky Global's board had ultimately embraced comprehensive reform rather than continued resistance. The airline appointed Mariana Rodriguez, a respected former federal judge with expertise in civil rights law, as its new CEO with a mandate to transform the company's culture and practices. Under her leadership, Sky Global implemented the most comprehensive anti-discrimination program in the industry, including revised training for all employees, explicitly addressing unconscious bias and emphasizing equal treatment regardless of race, gender, or other protected characteristics. Independent review of passenger complaints with quarterly public reporting on resolution and patterns identified. Elimination of confidential settlements for discrimination claims, replaced with transparent accountability and structural reforms. Creation of a passenger advocacy office empowered to address concerns before they escalated to formal complaints. Regular third-party audits using secret passengers from diverse backgrounds to test consistent application of policies and practices. Perhaps most significantly, the airline established a formal community advisory board, including civil rights leaders, travel advocates, and former discrimination complainants, with Marcus serving as inaugural chair, to provide ongoing feedback on the company's progress and challenges. For Richard Hamilton, the consequences had been equally significant. The exposure of his corrupt relationship with Wilson had triggered investigations into his broader business practices, revealing patterns of discrimination and questionable ethics extending far beyond the airline incident. Major clients had withdrawn from projects, partnerships had dissolved, and his once formidable influence had crumbled as former allies distanced themselves from the controversy. Hamilton Development Group, once among Atlanta's most prominent real estate firms, had been restructured under new leadership, with Hamilton himself relegated to minority shareholder status with no operational role. His personal lawsuit against Marcus had been not only dismissed, but deemed frivolous by the court, resulting in sanctions and payment of InnovateTech's legal costs. The experience had transformed InnovateTech as well. The company had emerged from the controversy stronger and more focused on its core mission of developing technology that expanded opportunities rather than reinforcing existing disparities. The publicity surrounding Marcus's stand against discrimination had attracted both clients and talent committed to ethical business practices, more than offsetting the losses from those who had withdrawn during the height of the conflict. Most remarkably, the innovative AI platform that had been the focus of the original San Francisco meeting had finally secured funding, not from Apex Ventures, but from a consortium of investors specifically seeking to support minority-owned businesses with transformative technologies. Most notably, Marcus had established the Equal Dignity Foundation using his portion of the financial settlement from Sky Global. The organization provided legal support and advocacy for individuals experiencing discrimination in travel, hospitality, and public accommodations, particularly those without the resources or platform to fight such battles alone. As Flight 1237 reached cruising altitude, Marcus opened his laptop to review the Foundation's latest case. A group of Latino travelers who had experienced discriminatory treatment at a major hotel chain. The parallels to his own experience were evident, but these individuals now had resources and support that might otherwise have been unavailable. His reflection was interrupted by a notification on his phone. A message from Trevor Parker, the flight attendant whose courageous decision to share internal documents had been crucial in exposing Sky Global's discriminatory practices, despite the personal risk involved. 1-year anniversary, the message read. Grateful for your support during the darkest time. New position at Rodriguez Consulting going well. Changed industry starts with changed individuals. After the settlement, Marcus had helped Parker secure a position with a consulting firm established by Mariana Rodriguez before her appointment as Sky Global's CEO. The firm specialized in helping organizations identify and address structural biases in their practices and policies, work for which Parker's first-hand experience proved invaluable. Similar messages arrived throughout the day from others whose lives had intersected with Marcus's battle. Catherine Reynolds, whose investigative reporting had helped expose the corruption at Sky Global's highest levels. Patricia Evans, who had risked her career to provide crucial evidence when the fight seemed lost. Even Allison Davis, continuing her journey from enforcer of discriminatory policies to advocate for their reform. Each communication represented a ripple effect, extending far beyond Marcus's individual experience. Lives changed, perspectives shifted, systems reformed in ways that would benefit countless individuals whose names would never make headlines. As the flight began its descent into San Francisco, Marcus's phone buzzed with a final message. This one from Aisha, who had remained his steadfast ally throughout the ordeal, and now served as Innovate Tech's CEO following Marcus's decision to focus on strategic vision and the Equal Dignity Foundation's work. Apex Ventures meeting confirmed for tomorrow, her text read. Gregory Walsh specifically requested your presence. Apparently, he's had a transformative perspective shift since our last interaction. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Walsh, whose investment firm had declined to fund Innovate Tech after witnessing Marcus's removal from first class, now sought to rebuild the relationship, likely influenced by both the company's subsequent success and the public reckoning around discrimination in corporate America that Marcus's stand had helped catalyze. The landscape had indeed shifted dramatically in the year since that fateful flight. What had begun as one man's humiliation had evolved into a movement for accountability and reform that extended far beyond a single incident or company. The changes weren't perfect or complete. Discrimination remained a daily reality for many. But meaningful progress had replaced passive acceptance of the status quo. As the aircraft touched down in San Francisco, Marcus found himself seated across the aisle from a young black executive in a perfectly tailored suit, confidently reviewing presentation materials for what appeared to be an important meeting. Their eyes met briefly in silent recognition, not of personal acquaintance but of shared experience navigating spaces where their belonging had often been questioned. In that moment, Marcus realized that perhaps the most significant outcome of his year-long battle wasn't the policy changes, legal victories, or personal vindication, but the example it provided for others facing similar challenges. By refusing to accept discrimination as the cost of success in America, he had helped expand the possibilities for dignity and equal treatment, not just for himself but for countless others whose stories intersected with his own. The true resolution wasn't a point in time, but an ongoing process of transformation. Individual hearts and minds, corporate policies and practices, societal expectations and norms. The work would continue long after the headlines faded and public attention shifted elsewhere. As Marcus exited the plane, he noticed a group of young flight attendants in training observing the deplaning process. Their diversity stood in stark contrast to the homogeneous crews he had encountered throughout much of his business travel career. One trainee, A young black woman with natural hair and quiet confidence caught his eye and nodded slightly, perhaps recognizing him from media coverage or simply acknowledging a fellow traveler. In that simple exchange lay the promise of progress, not the elimination of all discrimination or the perfect resolution of complex social challenges, but the steady, determined expansion of dignity and belonging for all people, regardless of their appearance, background, or identity. Marcus returned the nod, carrying with him the knowledge that his refusal to surrender his seat, both literally and metaphorically, had contributed to creating space for others to occupy their rightful places without question or challenge. It wasn't the end of the journey, but a meaningful milestone along the path toward the more just and equitable society they continued to pursue. One seat, one policy, one transformed perspective at a time. Have you ever stood up against injustice and seen how one person's courage can create ripple effects far beyond what they imagined? This story shows how refusing to accept discrimination can lead to meaningful change that impacts countless lives. If you found Marcus's journey inspiring, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more powerful stories of courage and transformation. Drop a comment sharing your own experience standing up for what's right, or how this story impacted you. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that fighting for justice, even when it's difficult, is always worth it. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, remember that change begins with one person refusing to accept the unacceptable. Marcus Johnson's story teaches us that confronting racism requires both personal courage and strategic persistence. When faced with discrimination, the easiest path is often silence, accepting the injustice to avoid conflict and preserve comfort. Yet lasting change only comes when brave individuals refuse to accept unequal treatment, even at great personal cost. The battle against discrimination is rarely quick or simple. As Marcus discovered, systems of power protect themselves, often retaliating against those who challenge them. Success requires resilience, documentation, and building alliances with others committed to justice. Most importantly, this story reminds us that discrimination isn't just about individual incidents, but about the structures and cultures that enable them. True progress comes not from punishing single actors, but from transforming the systems that allow bias to flourish. When we stand against injustice, we create possibilities not just for ourselves, but for countless others who face similar challenges. By refusing to surrender his seat, both literally and metaphorically, Marcus expanded the space for dignity and belonging for all who would come after him. The fight for equality continues, but progress happens when ordinary people make the extraordinary decision to say, "Not this time."